Well. Good morning, good evening, good night, and goodbye. Hello? Where are we? No. This is the Reexamination Show, broadcasting from the surface of the sun. Let me rearrange this. If you're going to have Selling England by the Pound, it might as well be front and center. Anyhow, today's subject, again, moral argument 3. We're going to see different kinds of iterations of the moral argument and how it can be implemented right here, right now, today on the Reexamination Show. And so, as we begin, I'm going to start with a few things that happened in news. Number one, I was actually, because of Robin Webster, who is in the chat. Say hello, Robin. Hello to the crowd out there, the crowd of one. Actually, the crowd of 3 now, I think. We got a decent amount of people here. I call 3 a decent amount. I was actually able to go up on Pangburn and ask a question to Not So Erudite about her theology. Unfortunately, I don't exactly think I got what I wanted, but, we will take a look at that real quick. I think it's about here, so.
Treatment over full rehabilitation.
Yeah, because I think you probably can guess this already, but I'm more in favor of I feel like sobriety seems more optimal, assuming the sobriety is even possible. Because I can understand there are some people who maybe maybe their brains are just not capable of sobriety.
Forged by Grace, how you doing? Newcomer along. Were you at what stream were you at? I think I'm trying to remember which channel. Maybe Tavos San Aubrey. Maybe you were on that stream.
They just have too much of an addictive personality. But yeah, and I guess I'll just add this one in because this is a really easy question and it will take you a second to answer.
Hey, there's me right over there.
Do you think in another life, and just because I hear that there's a lot to do with brain chemistry?
90.
Who knows? Maybe.
And then also against Uno Momento. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I just want to say hi, Kyla. Usually I'm disagreeing with you on a lot of things from a conservative, Reformed Baptist, Six-Day Creation theological basis. But I will say this, on one of my podcasts with a guy named Rev Russ, we were on your side in terms of being against Jesse Lee Peterson and his weird women are Satan kind of stuff. And then also against what was that girl, Sarah Stock, and the Christian nationalism stuff. So I'm in this weird position watching your debates, thinking I'm going to be critiquing you, ending up, agreeing with you on most points. And of course, advertising for Pangburn, racking up all that money. But I just wondered how your Orthodox progressive Christian theology, how is that arranged? What's the tradition, and what are the methods that put all the theology in place for that theology?
Yeah, so it's a Protestant branch. It's called Radical Orthodoxy. It's a branch of postmodern theology. So
I don't know what a postmodern theology is. As I said with the Rex and Rev episode, meet her in September. Isn't she gonna be in Canada? Oh, she's already. Wait, isn't she a U.S. citizen? I don't know where she's gonna be. British Columbia, right? Hey, people! It's Aiden Linden dipping out of the mod stream, coming over to Reexamination stream, and to answer your question, Forged by Grace, doing all right. We got kind of rained out, and then I wanted to jog, and then because it rained out, I'm like, you know what? I'll do a show. I wanted to do a show anyway, and then I end up with sunny days, which makes me kick myself. She kicked Sarah's butt. Yeah, she did. Sarah did not stand a chance.
There aren't a lot of churches. Probably most people that I know that are Radical Orthodox are probably going to go to Episcopalian churches.
Postmodern theology is like postmodern art. Is there Baroque theology as well? Well, I would say her theology is pretty Baroque.
Frankly, I don't think that's overly, so kind of a modernist Protestant. So that, I feel like that's mostly answering your thing. I'm Protestant.
Is that purely allegorical, where you have a secular basis, but you like to put it kind of in the ice cube tray of theological terms that the Bible uses? Or what do you?
No, it's I believe in a magic sky daddy very deeply and personally, and talk to him all the time. And I believe in the magic that he does in this world. I just reject a lot of modern theological stuff. But like I literally believe in a God, in a theistic God that's a Trinity that hopefully I go to heaven afterwards. I haven't fucked.
Yikes. So I would say that Kyla, you're probably not, if you do end up watching this show, it does not come down to you and your goodness and your works. It comes down to Christ taking our sin on that cross, that burden of our sin, and dying in our place, receiving the full wrath of God and the punishment against sin, so that if we trust in his sacrifice, where he just died, buried, he rose again, then you can rely on what he did and he will change your heart and make you into a new person. And you won't have to hope about you being good enough, because none of us are good enough. The message of Christ is that if if you want to take it from an atheistic perspective, if God exists, there is no God you could satisfy with your works and your good deeds, because he could just make a perfect version of you and throw you in the garbage. But he doesn't do that. The Bible says a broken reed he will not break, and a smoking wick he will not flax. Smoking flax he will not quench. So God has pity on horrible people like us. Not of works, lest any man should boast. Aiden Linden has been going to Bible study. I will send you the info on her in Canada visit. She is a dual citizen. Unfortunately, Robin, I will not be able to go unless, I get my passport stuff together.
Not too much.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not cultural Christianity, if that's what you're asking.
Got it. Yeah, I don't want to monopolize, but I feel like I would have a ton of questions on how that would work. But if you ever want to drop by my modest channel for an interview from a conservative basis, that'd be good. But I don't want to take over anybody's time. But thank you for your answer.
All right, thank you. Reexamination.
So yeah, that was fun. That was cool. She was a good sport about it. But let's see. I want to also get into, this is a bit more hostile. This is me going on Phantom's channel, as Mod might say it. Phantom, Fan2D2, who's apparently the atheist version of me. And then, so I think I was watching it live, and I don't know if I got invited or if there was some way I found out about this, but I decided to test it out on an atheist who was willing to get in a soapbox and say, I demand evidence.
Right, when he was preaching, he said it will be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah in that.
Aiden says, however, just because good works aren't necessary for salvation in and of themselves does not mean they do not help to verify if someone is saved. Correct. Your heart is changed by the Holy Spirit. You do them. Like say, it's like saying a certificate of authenticity for a signed document isn't the document itself. Of course it isn't, but it's useful in determining the document's authenticity. Yeah, I think Aiden has more theological knowledge than, unfortunately, most people in church. Fan2D2 says, Zilzone, welcome to the Reexamination Show.
That day than you. Right there, because there's a difference, okay? Lying is not the same as murder, okay? So Hitler is going to be in a way more worse.
That's right. Lying is not the same as murder. They caught me lying, but they'll never catch me for what I did back in Philly.
Punishment than you, Javier, okay? If you don't murder someone, okay? So, but it's still going to be hell. Your punishment is not going to be as serious as that. God is going to do it perfectly. He knows everything you've done. He's seen it all. He's the perfect judge.
So if hell is just eternal separation, what? I'm going to be a little bit separated only?
You got to keep them separated.
Well, eternally, no, fully separated.
Yeah,
Fully.
but your punishment is going to be determined on your sin. It's going to be determined on, it's going to be appropriate. That's what I'm saying.
Well, also, let's not forget the fact that the standard is absolute perfection. So it's not like, it's just gradations. I'm just living my life. God's living his life. Well, no, he created us. He created us for a purpose. And the created purpose was to reflect him and to be in right relationship with him. And so if you offend all the infinite God, you receive all the infinite punishment. And sin is actually much worse than we realize. If we realized how bad sin was, it would probably drive us mad. And on top of that, you said, well, why can't God just wave his hand in forgiveness? Well, because he's got more attributes than just love. He is also a God of justice. Yes. And so I want everybody to imagine in the chat right now a world with absolutely nothing wrong in it. And everything is harmonious. Everything is wonderful. There's no war. There's no debt. People love each other. They are... resources are being freely exchanged for the goodwill of people. There's no self-interest. There's just people. I mean, that would be, I don't even know if we can imagine a world without sin just because it's based on how sinful we are, but that would be amazing. And imagine being the person who ruined it. Imagine being the first person who sinned and brought a curse and broke that world. Just the difference between the two. And so somebody has to die. Somebody has to die. And God can't just like, well, I'm just going to let this go unpunished. And so
Like the
guilt,
bad judge, like the
and so-
bad judge in my analogy. You could just let the guy who killed your kids
But,
go free. That's a
yeah,
bad
but-
judge.
So the
This-
guilt gets transferred from those who repent and believe to Christ on the cross, and the innocence of Christ, the righteousness of Christ, gets transferred to the believer upon repentance and faith. And that's what's called double imputation. So I wanted to clear up that part of what's going on and why it requires blood, why it requires punishment, why it requires death.
So God went through an act of violence. So that act of violence, we didn't have to suffer it. Someone paid for my sins.
The fact of it is we sinned unprovoked by God. Our actions of sin were completely unprovoked. God owns everything. He gave Adam and Eve the garden, and then they
what does that
rebelled,
to
and we
do with what I
continue to
said?
rebel.
What does that have to do with what I just said?
That it's
He
deserved.
chose-
Everything,
he chose
because
to-
you're doing victim blaming. That's why. Right. You can't say that, well, we offended
victim
God.
Okay. Yeah, I
Yes,
don't see the
yes,
victim
God,
blaming.
God was offended by our sin. Hey, certainty exists. Welcome back. Welcome back. Robin Webster says mercy is injustice to the innocent. Well, I agree that absolute morality exists, and I'm glad that we have made progress in that direction. So to say that, oh, God did an act of violence, but to address it more fully, when you say mercy is injustice to the innocent, in this case, God is the innocent. God made us, gave us creation, and we have affronted him with our sin, and therefore, even though it doesn't actually hurt him, in terms of justice, he would be standing as the victim of violence against his right to our absolute undivided obedience. And therefore, he has standing based on that justice to do with us as he sees fit. And if he wants to give us mercy, he still has to be just. And that's why there's the transference of our sin to the account of Christ and Christ's righteousness to our account. So now our account is no longer sinful, but righteous as Christ is righteous. And now on the cross, his account is sinful as if he were us. It's like, well, okay, well, he either does it to you or he does it to Christ. And he sent Christ specifically so that we, and then she says, baloney. You wouldn't have to die. And then so any trying to flip on that is just victim. Hola, Chapingro. Sorry I couldn't continue our conversation from earlier in the natural law room. But that would have been fun. I just had to get some guitar maintenance done, and I probably will have to get more guitar maintenance done in the future.
So what happens when I go to hell?
You
You're
are
separated
under
from
the
God.
infinite wrath. You are under the infinite wrath of God. Absolutely true. Coco Shuko Papa Shango, welcome back. How you doing?
So probably I would be
just
thinking
justice.
about I should
This one guy, welcome. Okay, I'm going to continue with the debate.
well I should have been going to the cross myself. Probably I don't have to go to eternal fire.
Well,
You
seeing
said
as
you're
seeing as
trusting
Jesus,
in God.
hold up. Seeing as Jesus is God, he can serve an eternal punishment within a finite amount of
This is
time. because he
preaching.
himself
I'm
is
sorry,
infinite.
re-examination. This is preaching. You're preaching.
So
Okay, well, you can characterize
this
it as
is what you
preaching, whatever you
believe.
don't want to listen to. Okay, you wanted answers. I'm giving you answers. So when you
No,
get
you're
answers, you
preaching.
can't call it preaching and just start complaining.
Yeah, you're saying God is this, God is that. This is what you believe, my friend. This is
Aren't you asking
this is
what we
an,
believe?
This is an
What
act
kind of
of
complaint is
violence.
So, Aiden Linden, you come up upon one of the biggest questions of all time. And I have gone through things in my life that came down to, am I really saved or not? And had stretches of, a few years in my life, up and down, thinking that I was not saved in that case. And so there had been struggles of like, when I look at myself and I look at, my username again is re-examination. And part of that is because I am an extremely introspective person about my motives and the reasons for my motives and all these kinds of things. And when it comes down to like, if I have no Holy Spirit, then I in of myself, without God's influence, would not love him. But the only reason I do love him is because of the influence in the Holy Spirit in me. And it wouldn't be like it wouldn't be there if not for God's work, because we all are born hating God. But if you're asking me in this current position, like I remember when I was thinking I wasn't saved, I cried over the fact that I thought I was separated from Christ because I thought that Christ was my savior, and not just because he saved me, because I appreciated him. You know, I loved him, and so the thought of being away from him was the loss of comfort. You know, a loss of assurance. So, but that question is a question that should be asked in the vast majority of churches. So, the right response to God would be that God has never done anything against me. God has never wronged me. God does not owe me salvation. If anything, I have wronged God, and for that I deserve an eternal hell. And so I appreciate the mercy that he's given me and the life that he's given me. And even though parts of it have been very hard, and very difficult, life is still a gift at the end of the day. Life is still in and of itself amazing, not because you get to go to Six Flags and you get to like eat Chipotle. Obviously, it's because life is in and of itself essentially a wonder. And so, but I do often think about like my motivational weights in terms of why am I doing what I do, and I do that very frequently. I mean, these days I'm very much consumed with the streaming and trying to get the gospel out there and trying to engage with people on as good faith basis as I can. You know, everybody's got their moments where under duress they start doing stupid stuff, and I've been, you know, I've done some things that, you know, I wish I hadn't done, but yeah, no, that's a good question. I think every Christian or every professing Christian should be asked that question, not just by atheists, but also by their pastors in the pulpit and their pastors in the office and their pastors every year, if not, you know, every so often. Because it comes down to is like, if you love me, why don't you keep my commandments? Jesus says. And so if you love him, you will keep his commandments. Yeah. And so if you're not loving him, you know, then you have to figure out what your incentive structure really is, because there's no reason to hate God. Like when the passage talks about how Jesus was hated by the Pharisees, it says they hated him without a cause. And that's 100% true. Chapingra says, "You're good, buddy. Glad to see you streaming. Hope to be more like you someday." Well, I think we should be more like Christ. Thank you to the 5 who smacked that like button. Certainty exists. He says, "What is the ultimate authority in your worldview?" And it begins. Smash the like, you filthy animals. Oh man, life is such a gift. Yeah, so you say, "I appreciate that answer, but respectfully, I don't think it cuts the heart of what I'm asking. In my opinion, Christianity, like all mainstream religions, are transactional. It acts like it has somehow ascended to nature transaction nature of transactional behavior, but I think simply shifts the transaction from materialistic in nature to immaterialistic. Do X and you will get Y in return." Well, Aiden, it's funny because in a lot of my readings of different old guys throughout history in terms of how they counseled people on how to get saved, one of the things that they talk about is like, well, how am I supposed to come to God? I'm a sinner. I'm lost. I know I'm lost. I know I don't have the Holy Spirit. I know enough to be scared of hell. I know enough to be frightened of God and to understand that my sin has damned me. So now what? What do I do? I'm already sin. I'm trying to come to God, but I come to him with selfish motives. I come to him saying, I don't want to go to hell. The reason I'm coming to you, God, is because I don't want to go to hell, not because I actually love you, not because I'm actually, you know, interested in getting away from my sin. I'm just scared, and that's all it is a self-motivated calculation of all these sorts of things. And then so what the pastors would say to those people is like, yes, you are totally depraved. Yes, sin is the characteristic that reigns in your heart. And as such, you recognize that, but that's part of why you have to come to God as you are, because you are so selfish, because you are so sinful, because you are so sin sick. And yes, we are made to have incentive structures. We are made to have desires. We are made to have a self-interest benefit, a self-interest ethic in ourselves. Not that we, you know, everything is about the self, because that would be selfishness, but it only makes for a better design I would say overall for people to be like, look, I recognize that this actually, I would enjoy what has benefit. I would take heed to what has benefit in these sorts of things. I should think and have some degree of self-interest. If you think of a crazy person, one of the characteristics of a crazy person is that they have lost touch with all self-interest in terms of their lives. They'd have no idea that like if their house is burning down behind them and they're just obsessed with a little anthill, watching the ants play on the anthill, it's like something is wrong with you. You should have a degree of self-interest. It's only healthy. It only makes sense. Robin Webster says, I have local authorities, state authorities, and federal. Birds Aren't Even Real says, pulling life back from the jaws of death. Okay. Kokoshuka Papashengo gives us a little melting emoji. Chipinga says, you're fun and a good dude. Robin Webster says, that's why you shouldn't be arguing. You haven't even thought of that yet. You merely argue from the foundation of your current feelings, your own personal reasons. Okay, he's talking about the previous stream I did where I was doing the whole your own personal reasons, something to give you excuse, then you vamoose. Okay, Forged by Grace says, glad you like that. Try and throw a little humor in. What the heck is Chipingo? What are we talking about? Certainty. Just because you don't like my answer does not mean I have thought about it. Clearly, what you are talking about is at least part of the equation, though. If it isn't, why is fearing God such a huge component of being biblical in nature? The beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord, because if you don't have fear of the Lord, you don't realize that God can throw both your body and soul into hell. These are very good questions, Aiden, and they do cut to the heart of what's going on in terms of theology. Are you going to God merely because you think that is going to benefit you? That would make you God in your case. But let's say you come to God knowing that you are selfish, knowing that you are self-aggrandizing, knowing all these things about yourself, but also having enough cognition to recognize that all those things are also sinful. Now what? Now you know that you can't come to God thinking that God's going to be your servant and bow at your feet, right? And so you can know that intellectually and take that issue to God because you cannot regenerate yourself. You cannot change yourself. Why is fearing God? Well, first of all, we have to qualify fear because I believe it's in 1 John talks about perfect love casting out fear. So there's two kinds of fear here. There is a fear that has to do with you are under judgment and you have not repented. And then there is a fear that is a very real fear, all the same, because you know what God's capable of. But there is a security at the same time in the knowledge of God's saving love. So that would only make sense to be fearful of God. It wouldn't make any sense not to. I mean, even the demons tremble, but, you know, there are a lot of people, even in church, who don't tremble at God. Okay, Chapinger wants to go full Hegelian dialectic. That's, yeah. Forged by Grace says, fear to me translates over to respect. So, Forged, I would say fear is fear. There is respect with that. But and the trembling would come to a cease. Like you're not going to. It's not going to be a servile fear once you have actually repented and trusted in Christ, because Romans 5:1 talks about how now having been sanctified by faith, we have peace with God. How far back am I in the comments, guys? I'm like 18 comments up in this. I am so sorry. I'm trailing.
Killing a human being just to demonstrate love, you know, go through an act of violence is no way to demonstrate love to anybody. This is just ridiculous.
Stop,
well, then you're preaching. I'm just going to call whatever you say preaching then, because an act of violence is just a value claim.
Javier, stop saying that it was only because of love. It was because of love, but it was to pay the sin debt, specifically to deal with the justice.
Aiden says fear is an inherently self-interested motivation. Yes, I believe that God gave us self-interested motivations for our benefit. I mean, if you're an evolutionary biologist, you can make a logic for that. I think if you're a creationist, you can do the exact same thing, except, you know, contextualize it and make it make sense in the overall framework of epistemology and teleology. Even other people, let me read. Part of that fear you feel for others is through the lens of having experienced it through witnessing it happen. Rex, you need reading comprehension. Thanks, Robin.
And the wrath of God for us. And it was loving. but it was a mission to save us from the hell we deserve.
Diva, but hold on a second, my friend. I know that you are a smart human being. How
That's
come
right.
you cannot understand that God is your savior and he is also your punisher? What part of that you don't understand?
Well, when you own everything, then you can make judgment calls. So, yes, you can save, you can exercise mercy, and you can exercise justice, and it's up to you. God has that free will to do that. I don't see the problem. What's wrong with
Who's
that?
going to punish evil? Who's going to punish evil? Somebody who's all-knowing or somebody who's a biased judge?
Evil was
Fair.
created by God, my friend.
No, God
No.
allowed for evil to exist. He didn't create.
So are you
He
saying
allowed
that
it.
there's something in this world that God did not create?
That's right. He didn't create evil. He
Yeah,
allowed.
the creation. There were 6
evil.
days of creation, and evil was not categorically. God cannot rebel against himself because he would be using his will to do it, and seeing as he's the foundation of reality, his will is ultimately what's going to be, and so he's not going to offend himself. So that would have to be on the secondary cause level. There's primary cause, which is God, and secondary cause, which is the free will choices of his creatures. And that would necessarily have to be in the secondary level in order to be sin. But among them,
So there are things in this earth that God did not create. Then who created them?
yeah. So evil, certainty exists. Robin Webster. Robin, I want you guys both to play nice, in here and have a nice, calm discussion if you can. If you can't, I get it. That's the way of YouTube. We don't see each other, and we just, it's a slugfest. But maybe I'm just not realistic. What constitutes a free will rebellion against God? So when you say that it's created, it's not like it's made of matter.
Okay,
or that
so
it's
let's
an
say
entity.
that I agree with you. Where the conditions came from that we have this ability to disobey God? How come we have that option, that possibility,
Free will.
and we don't
Free
have
will.
the
Answer
Because it was-
one.
No.
Would a tertiary cause be like the wind blowing you off your feet? That's a good question. I don't know. I'll tell you why. Because it was all part of God's plan. Because if you read Revelation 3:18, it says that I meant 13:8, not 3:18. Jesus is the Lamb of God, slain before the foundation of the world. So this was already known by God, already part of his redemptive work. And we read from Romans 9 that there can be people who are vessels of wrath.
So
And God can do whatever he wants with whatever he creates.
right? Creating us with the
You know, no, I wanna-
possibility, with the conditions to sin, okay, to sin against him, so he can
Yeah.
punish us.
No, so we could have real love.
So I don't necessarily agree so we could have real love part, because God could have just made a world where nobody sinned and you could love it just as much. So I don't think that was a necessary precondition for love. I mean, God himself is uncreated, and the Father loves the Spirit loves the Son loves the Father. So I think that's more like ad hoc Arminian type philosophy stuff. It's not real biblical theology as far as I can tell.
Because
So-
without free will, we don't have love. So you
If
got to remember.
how you gonna be receiving endless love in hell? How?
You're not. You're
Wow.
not. But I'm saying you have the opportunity to love today and to be loved because you have a free will to choose it. Without
problem
a
is
free
you
will,
have
you
a-
have no choice. You're a
You are
robot.
presenting a one-dimensional God. It's like, well, it's a God. It's just the God of love,
I
love, love. And then so if I
I
can present
didn't
it's not
ask
love,
to
that means I might have been a few behind, but yes, that is correct. God is love, and that's why we got fear him. Well, consider this: if God is love and people hate him, what does that make people? It makes them sinners. It makes them evil. They hate love itself. They hate righteousness itself. I don't see the justification for hating God.
be-
It debunks God.
I
That's
didn't
not how that
ask
works.
to be created to participate in this scheme of where I
So
have
what?
to jump through hoops to see if I deserve God's love, where he is being the creator, the rewarder, the punisher. He creates everything. I don't get to create anything. He creates everything,
right.
the conditions
That's
and
right.
everything in order
Let me
for
let-
what?
let me ask you this.
Hold on.
Let me ask you this.
What
If you-
what
if
is
you-
what is the main what is
creation.
the main optimum goal of God? What is he trying to achieve?
Wait, hold on. In the difference, in your mind, what's the difference between childbirth and kidnapping?
What is he trying to achieve?
What's
What
the
is his
difference between
optimal goal?
childbirth and kidnapping in your mind?
Well, in all
What
fairness,
is
he
God's
asked the question first.
optimum goal?
His
Yeah, so
ultimate
the
goal,
ultimate goal-
is to
the ultimate
have
goal
a
is his
loving
glory.
relationship with us, and
What
that's
is
what he's
what?
done.
What
His
say that
ultimate
again?
goal, his ultimate goal is he desires. He doesn't need us, but he desires to have a loving relationship with us.
What is this
To give us
desire
the
coming
best
from?
thing,
What is
to
this
give us-
desire coming from?
because God is love. That's his nature. He's always good and he's always loving. That's his nature. That's who he
He's
is.
also always just and righteous.
So for
Right.
eternity, his love and he
What atheists often like to do is they'll talk about love, 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 and they will hide the justice aspect in the corner and the free will aspect of God being able to create the kind of universe however he wants and have history unfold however he wants. And you'd be completely just to do that because it belongs to him. And there's really no problem here. So when it comes to the problem of evil, number one, Bonson clearly points out that you can't have actual moral evil unless God exists. And then number two, on top of that, God is not offending any moral law, nor is it contradictory for God to use a world where there is a fall and then where there is tragedy in order to glorify himself, not only in the redemption of the wicked, but also in the punishment of the wicked to show his righteousness. I mean, it can sound harsh to us, but again, there's nothing actually wrong with that.
was not able to, for eternity, to express his love.
No, that's not true because he expresses love between his triune persons.
Exactly. He chose to.
Guys,
he chose
this
to
is what
live-
you believe.
Well, of course, because you're going to talk to us, you get what we believe. Robin Webster says, I don't see the justification for calling the biblical God love. Robin, what would you see justification for calling something or something at all or someone love?
This is
Right.
a crazy
aren't you
story
asking what we
about-
believe? Like, what's the difference?
Why don't you say, hey, I just feel good with this information. It makes me feel good. It's crazy stories. It's violence. This is radicalism.
Okay, so
Yeah,
crazy
it's-
infers like there's an objective right standard of thinking. So what is the objective right standard of thinking that you can point to? Because to say crazy is to say that we ought to think differently.
I feel good. It feels
God,
good. to me.
God
it feels-
wanted to feel love, He wanted to feel love, right? He wanted to
Yo, Seahawk Daddy, how you doing? Seahawk, I saw you commenting a lot on my exchange with Teriak on nationalism and national identity and things like that. So I didn't get a chance to talk with you. I was watching some of your comments here, but I was also trying to pay attention to what Teriak was saying, and I can only cross-eye for so long before my brain starts to split in two and I have no brain left. 1 John 4:8, he that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. Amen.
express this love.
Okay,
So-
I answered your question. Now I'm asking you the question. You said it's crazy. So what is the way that everybody ought to think, seeing as there's a standard of how we ought not think? What is the way we ought to think as humans? That's a great question. Re-examination. I would also add, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Where did that ought come from, and what is it?
I think that you coming to a conclusion about stuff that you believe is real without having any evidence is the definition of coming to a conclusion because of how it feels.
Because you don't accept the evidence, that doesn't mean there's not evidence.
What
That's
evidence?
your choice not to accept the
What
evidence.
evidence?
I don't even
What
know what
evidence?
you said there.
Yeah, you don't understand about what I'm talking about. What evidence?
Well, God says, and I believe that there's enough evidence for you to take a step of faith toward him or to reject him. And so if you take a step to reject him, that's your choice. But
Okay.
your
there's enough
evidence?
evidence for you.
Here's
Whether
the
you're
problem.
upset-
Here's the problem with your objection too. Is you believe in moral realism. You believe that it's horrible what God did. If the God that we believe in is true, that it's horrible, but you don't have any evidence to back up a standard of morality. So how is that any different? And that's what I think people take for granted is they do believe in right and wrong. They do believe in absolute morality. I remember one guy, he was just kind of I don't know if he was anti-realist. I don't know if it was a moral anti-realist, but he thought that life itself was an illusion. But I also knew that he was a 9/11 conspiracy theorist. So I said, well, then your conspiracy theories aren't really. It's like, oh no, well actually that is true. It's like, okay, dude, you just find something that they actually treasure and poke at it and see what happens.
But they
I
do.
think that if we stand in front of a person that is being brutalized like Jesus went through, we'll come to the same conclusion that we're going to try to stop it. Right?
I was curious why you removed the chat from the VOD. Oh, I didn't remove anything. So, or at least not, I mean, it might be a default setting, but I wouldn't remove that. I like chat. I like looking back at chat too. I especially like looking at different worldviews on that. But yeah, I can look into that and put that up. If you remind me next time, I'll go and look into that. Maybe you're on Discord. You can check me out on Discord. Well, why can't I just tell you that? Well, that makes you feel good to believe that. Why can't I just throw that back at you?
It does make me feel good to stop violence.
Okay, so is that a value claim, or is it just a claim about what you feel about certain issues?
It's absolutely based on my experience in this life and based on the information I have in front of me in this world that most people don't agree with violence.
Okay, great. So I don't know why we characterize some things as violence and other things as just natural phenomenon. To characterize something as violence is to give a narrative and a moral scope to what happens. So when you say violence, would that also apply to animals? And if it doesn't apply to animals, why not? Wouldn't we just call that nature and instinct? So how is your view objectively better than mine if your view is based on feelings and my view is based on feelings?
Yeah.
Your God flooded the entire world, man. What is there?
Okay, before we save him, I want to answer the question. If both of our views are based on feelings entirely, then okay. So Robin Webster says my biblical justification, which is still using the Bible, for saying God is not love is 1 Corinthians 13:4-7. Okay, so first of all, you would need a standard outside of the Bible in order to judge the Bible in terms of morality. So 1 Corinthians 13:4-7. Love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy or boast, is not arrogant or rude, it does not insist in its own way, is not irritable or resentful, it does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Yeah, so what does that have to do with God? God has ultimate standing for every offense that we've done against him. And so would it not be incumbent upon God to deal out justice to those of us who have broken his law and ruined his world? Like to say that God is not love because he doesn't, I mean, weren't you the one earlier who said that something about it's not loving to the victim to have mercy for the guilty? And now we're kind of doing a reverse trot. It feels kind of like not a standard. Kokoshuko says he was wishy-washy with his lingo. Yes, he was. I think he was used to people not challenging him on his moral framework. Why is it making yours better than mine?
Because you're stuck in the feeling. I'm not stuck in the feeling.
I don't know what that means.
Continue. You have come to a conclusion that God is good. I have not come to that conclusion. I'm asking questions.
Yeah, but I'm asking questions too, because that goes both ways.
Why is he wrong?
I think
so you believe in moral standards. You believe that certain actions are inherently bad. I'm asking you for what your evidence was, since you require evidence for everything you believe. So if that's inherently bad, objectively, where do you get your evidence for that?
So if I touch the stove.
Robin Webster says, because God is not love. So the only way God could be love is if he doesn't, I mean, look. That's just an assertion at the end of the day. I mean, I'm trying to work with you here, but it just sounds like you have the conclusion behind every one of your premises anyway.
Is that bad or good?
Is that what? No, I'm asking for evidence of objective good or bad, as in moral good and moral bad.
No,
I don't come to conclusions that there's objective truth or whatever. I just go by how I feel and trying to reach to conclusions, but not entirely on how I feel. I have to use my critical thinking, and relate to whatever I have in front of me.
Javier,
okay. So what makes killing good or bad in your mind?
Hold on, Javier. Do more people believe in Jesus Christ than whatever you believe in?
That would be an ad populum, I think. So I wouldn't go with that approach.
I don't think many people believe or think the way I think, that we humans have to ask questions. Yeah.
So your belief is less than a Christian. How many Christians what they believe, right? You're the minority view.
And that probably explains why.
So, Robin, once again, God is not, if God was just love and then no justice, no righteousness, no order, I mean, maybe that cartoonish understanding of God would make sense as an objection, but because God has way more than just one attribute or one aspect to his person, then therefore all these can harmonize. He defines the term and acts in ways that are not aligned with his own definition. Of course he does. But when it comes to him having standing to our offenses as having sinned against him, he is also just. To say he's not patient, I mean, doesn't he give people time to repent? To say he if God, and if you're saying, oh well, God shouldn't insist on his own way, then you're saying that God ought to leave it open for us to be wrong, because if God is the foundation of truth, if he loved us, he would allow us to go into sin. Like if he loved us, then he would say going to sin is fine, just going to hell is fine. I don't care. Your thing is your thing, and my thing is my thing, and we're like neighbors who have equal standing, and we have equal worth in this world. Who am I to say anything? I'm only God. Like these are incoherent objections, Robin. They don't make sense on a cosmic level. Exodus 20 verse 5. Let me guess. Is it thou shalt not kill? As in, thou shalt not murder. Shall not bow down to serve them, for I am the Lord and jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers and the children, and the third and fourth generation, those who hate me. So if you are a spouse and your spouse is cheating on you and you're jealous, does that mean you're wrong? No, because you have standing. You have a right to be jealous in that case. I mean, this is just Robin. Come on. Scripture says God is love, and you disagree. You don't believe in the Bible. That's right, Seahawk. 1 John 4:16. We know that we have known him and believed the love that God hath to us. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him.
We have the world that we have right now.
What I'm saying is, if more people believe this and you believe less, why would you tell them they're wrong?
Exodus 20 verse 5 defeats absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing whatsoever. Because in the case of people insisting to have their own way, they are people who are among equals trying to lord over people without the standing required in order to justify that. In God's case, he cannot categorically break any of those things because he has a right to every single thing, every single person, every single second, every single day. You can't reverse engineer that to work on God. That would have to pertain to people who don't have standing to demand things that don't belong to them ultimately. Everything ultimately belongs to God.
When we're telling you you're wrong, like it doesn't get anywhere. Just you believe what you believe.
And then she says, you were just hand waving away. No, I'm actually giving a system of understanding that makes it coherent. Yours is entirely incoherent.
And that's it.
I think that coming to the conclusions based on how you feel and not coming to conclusions only because of feel, but because of evidence, information, critical thinking, asking questions.
Which you don't have for moral absolutes. You profess moral absolutes.
Yeah, we have evidence.
You know, I think I can recognize an act of violence a mile away when you kill an innocent person. I think I don't give a moral standard for that.
You just did. You said innocent. You're using violence. You're using morally loaded language all over the place while claiming you don't. And I have critical thinking too, and I can see it when it's in front of me.
So if
where
I
is
see
your
someone,
evidence?
Okay, so if I
where is
see
your
someone
evidence
being
for absolute morality?
If I see a person being tortured in front of me, I'm not going to stand there like, okay, where's my standard of morality? No, probably I'm going to jump, you know, and try to stop it before they.
He's just admitting that he's entirely reactionary and doing things based on his feels as opposed to what he can actually establish.
Kill the person, and then I'll.
Okay, so
after that, I'm gonna. Absolutely.
Feelings.
Yes.
Okay. So what? So
okay.
your
Well,
feelings
then I don't know what I'm doing here. If we're all just based on feelings here, so
yeah. So let it go. Why?
Yeah. So that was the end of that. And then I also had another one. I was on Tavo-san Aubrey's show recently. Well, actually, this was on day 3. On day 3 is a very competent, very knowledgeable apologist for Christianity. And there was a guy named Kajak who had jumped in. He was a skeptic, and he was, I think he was kind of trolling. He came in, he wanted to pick a fight about Christianity. So here you go.
I think let me distill down an important point that I think cuts through this debate, because it is highly likely that we'll keep talking about this and never come to any resolution. So my suggestion to you is this: separate out the two questions. Don't stop asking the question that you're asking, but parallel to that and along the same journey, don't get stuck on it. Don't let it become an impasse.
All right, real quick, Robin. If moral justification is real, let's lay this out very, very simply, Robin. If moral justification for actions and attitudes is real, on what grounds does it subsist? Is morality based on an impersonal thing like a rock or open space or the laws of physics, or can it only be based from a personal source by which it would have to impart values and impart rules and impart a system upon people, seeing as mindless things can't do that and don't do that? If so, then how are you going to say that the person who is the grounds for the rules can break the rules if the person is entirely owning the things that are subject to those rules? So, for example, how could the person who owns the thing be the same value as the thing itself? If you own a train set, does that mean that, or let's see, even like, does that mean you're of equal value to the train set, or the train set has equal standing with you, right? And you would say, well, no, it has to be two people. Okay. So if the only reason that personhood exists is because we have a personal basis for humanity, then that personal basis is the standard for humanity. And to go against that standard would require punishment, right? Because then you would have an unjust God who did not deal out justice. Your angle is just the elimination of justice. It's not the exposure of hypocrisy or inconsistency with love. It's just elimination of justice.
Start asking the why type questions about the universe.
Sure.
Why are we here? What is there purposefulness? To me, it all comes down to.
And also, you'd have to say, if the standard is above God and God is subject to it, then you're just saying that that God is not God. So you're just doing a P and not P at the same time.
Is the universe a brute fact, or is the universe somehow purposeful, right? If it's a brute fact, then there ought to be other universes, right? And that is just a messier explanation.
I don't know
If
about
it's
that.
purposeful,
I do not claim that. I do not claim that.
Hey,
So I
hey,
wanted to say one last thing before I run away.
Well, before anybody runs away, I would like examination that I just put on to talk to KJ just for a little bit before you jump off, KJ.
Can I offer one thing? Can I offer one thing first, KJ?
Yes,
Because you keep making claims to science and empiricism. Science is not only.
She says, it's not my angle, it's God's definition. There are more things God says about himself than just that he is love. While it is true that God is love and he prefers mercy over sacrifice and he prefers mercy over judgment, that doesn't mean that he throws away justice and becomes a simplified Santa Claus, even if it becomes convenient for atheist arguments to make that case. Shupingra says, if you were an author / composer and I burn all your works, leaving you no method to recover them, say you forgot, have I taken from your person? So whether or not God can actually lose anything or have like damage beyond repair or be a victim of something that is like irrecoverable, obviously God can make whatever he wants. The question is, did we break his moral law? Springer says, have I taken part of you? I mean, there's an artistic way of saying yes for a human being who's a victim of somebody destroying their stuff, and then there's a literal material way of saying no.
Only about empiricism. It's also about the ability to understand abstract ideas, which we call rationalism. Rationalism and empiricism join together to create the scientific method. You should try some of the latter and less of the former.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Here, I have you muted, brother. Hold on one second. All right.
Oh, cool.
Good
Hey,
to
KJ.
see you, Rex. Really nice to see you.
Good to see you too. And nice to meet you on day 3 in Random Catholic and KJack.
Nice to meet you.
So KJack, question for you. why do you choose to value truth over non-truth?
I think that there are some utilitarian reasons to value truth over non-truth. I think that having a valid
Okay, so Robin says, my point is people should not claim God is love by his own definition of that word. Yeah, so his definition as prescription to us is going to... Hold on a second, Robin. When God sends people to hell, do you think it's a hell of love or a hell of wrath? Do you think it's a hell of mercy or a hell of justice? Because God can be judge, jury, and executioner. There's no contradiction in this, in him also being love. That does not compute that, therefore, he cannot be justice.
understanding of what is true in the world is safer. It is like my Lord and Savior John Wayne said. It's bad to it's a bad world. It's a mean world out there. It's even worse if you're stupid. And instead of stupid, I would say it's even worse if you believe incorrect things. Like, for example, believing that that vaccines do not work is an extremely dangerous proposition. And I would say that believing in correct.
Robin, you think love and justice are in contradiction?
True things as much as you can that affect your world.
I mean, Robin, if you say love does not insist on its own way, then would you say that punishment for the wicked and insisting from the governmental perspective that punishment should occur is violating what love is, because government is not love, because it insists that justice must be carried out?
Is a much more profitable thing to have than believing in things without evidence or on
Great. Okay, so if somebody came to you with the contrary worldview, the mere opposite of your worldview, what would be the tiebreaker you would use between the two of you to settle it?
My worldview, huh?
You just made a bunch of value claims. No, it just shows that you're in category error. You don't realize what a prescriptive law is versus what the totality of the source of what morality is, which would have to be a personal source, which is God. Which again, even if you were right, you would still have to explain how there is a transcendent moral authority over God that is impersonal, judging him to be right or wrong, or to be consistent, let alone consistent. So that doesn't prove anything, because you still need God as a prerequisite for consistency, for morality, for truth, for any of those sorts of things. Robin, I'm not dodging your point. This is just a non-point. It doesn't make any sense. It's a category error in the highest regard. I mean, let's put it this way. If the universe is descriptively, let's just say descriptively for the sake of this conversation, if the universe is framed by the laws of logic, and I, as a free moral agent, have contradicted the law of logic, some law of logic, whether it's the first, second, or third law, it may make some fallacy or something like that. Does that in any way prove that logic doesn't exist because I made a free will mistake? I mean, it's totally different, because the laws of logic are transcendent and things apply different to them than they would to me. Same thing is true with a transcendent God. So God is serving the purpose of both setting the stage for our character and also enforcing it based on his free will choices. Just made a moral mapping of what ought to, even if it's private to you, you believe that you use reason for a moral mapping in order to schematic where you should go in life and what you should do. And I'm presenting to you a hypothetical opponent that has the exact opposite moral map as you do. And so I'm asking you, between the two of you, what would you appeal to for a tiebreaker between you, both of you, if you were to reason him to your side?
Well, if there's a utilitarian argument, I do think that if someone
He's the opposite, though.
Yeah, so if someone came to me and said, I believe everything on faith, all my stuff is on faith, I'm anti-science, I'm pro-ignorance, then I would say, okay, have a great life.
So no tiebreaker.
Oh, you can't argue with someone who came to their beliefs from irrationality.
Well, that means you can't argue with rationality, because you just presented the fact that I gave you the exact opposite and you have enough nothing to say because because what you've done is you remove the prescriptive quality of reality that would make your utilitarian arguments at least kind of make sense. But if there's no purpose or value that is outside of yourself that you can use to inflict on somebody,
there is.
Yeah, there's a prescriptive value.
Oh
to life
yeah,
and reality.
I think believing in nonsense is maladaptive behavior evolutionarily. So I think that you are
Hey Robin, I'm going to put a verse in the chat. Jeremiah 32:18, you show steadfast love to thousands, but you repay the guilt of fathers to their children after them, O great and mighty God, whose name is the Lord of hosts. Now, if you have a cartoonish version of love in your head that is like, Saturday morning cartoons, then it can't allow for that kind of nuance. But ethical systems allow for nuance, including the nuance of justice while also having mercy. It's not contradictory to have a merciful sentence and a harsh sentence from the same judge. As long as there's justice, that's the one thing. And Robert Webster says justice. Yes, justice.
For example, Republicans died at a higher rate than Democrats did during the COVID crisis because of their non-belief in science and their positive belief in just random ignorance and faith. So that is how maladaptive beliefs can damage yourself. So that's one way to do it. But now, if I
first of all, damage is a design claim. Everything you've done is that you've made value claims about life and survival and human well-being, all of which you have not proven with science or any deductive method I've seen that can be demonstrated repeatedly. You assumed it.
No. Republicans did die at a higher rate than.
I didn't deny that. I deny the fact that you established there's actually value to human life or well-being in the first place, and to say damage is to presume design.
Oh, definitely. There's a value to human life.
Where is it? Where's your evidence?
Well, in empathy. Now, in the Bible. Now, if you're saying
so, empathy, if you're an atheist, is just a feeling by chemicals just following the continuous pull of the laws of physics, which negates it from being actual reasoning or actual third person kind of experience outside of the physical world. You have to make those value claims and judgments in the first place. Robin says, children being punished for their sins of their fathers is not justice. So I would say that you would have to have a concept of justice first before you would judge what justice would be in the first place. Yes, dude is arguing COVID jabs. Yes, he is arguing about COVID jabs. He is making value claims.
The Bible values human life, I would.
No. We're talking about atheism. We're talking about atheism, and we're talking about the explanatory power of atheism.
The only thing that atheism only shares one non-belief: the non-belief in God. Do you believe in leprechauns?
No.
Do you believe in fairies? Do you believe in fairies? Do you believe in fairies?
No, but here's the difference.
There's a
difference. Do you believe in?
All right, guys. I'm muting both people for just out of respect.
Yeah. Chipengro. I got a feeling that tonight's going to be a good night. Yeah. So apparently, if you start asking reasonable questions about their value mapping, they just start. I'm not going to say the S word, but they're just going to start like freaking out.
Muting both people real quick. All right. Guys, and KJX specifically, you're avoiding his question by appealing to things that just obviously are irrational things to talk about. Let's have a real conversation and answer the appealing answers, everything like that.
And then to answer what Robin was talking about, if you read the John Gill commentary on Jeremiah 32:18, as far as the children and the fathers, talks about recompenses the iniquities of the fathers unto the bosom of their children after them. It is added in the Decalogue from whence these words are taken, of them that hate me. Exodus 20, verse 5. And here the Targum adds, when they go on to sin after them. when they imitate their fathers in their wickedness and commit the same sins they have done and continue in them. Wherefore, having tilled up the measure of their fathers' sins, they receive a just and full recompense of them to their bosom, which denotes both the certainty of it and the fullness of it. The prophet formed in his mind notions and ideas of the divine being as not being only gracious and merciful, but holy, just and righteous. And it may be he strikes at the Jews who might complain of God, and sometimes did, for being punished for their fathers' sins, as if they themselves were innocent and guiltless. But of course, if you repent, then that's not held to your account. God does. If you turn to God, then God's not going to hold any account to you for your sins or for the sins of your fathers. But there are generational curses, and the problem is, not only is that fine for God to do, to account that, because if you continue in them, but often the people who continue in them are even worse than their fathers in doing it, unless they repent. Oh, and Robin, I was also thinking about playing guitar for like the Star Spangled Banner or something like that, but I don't know. I don't think I can do it right on the first take. What do we got here? Happy 4th, everybody.
And then re-examination for you. You're being respectful. Maybe just try to slow down a little bit for him. That's all. All right. Thank you.
All right, I'll slow down. All
right.
Go ahead, K-Jack.
So atheism is not a worldview. It is. There are terrible atheists. There are terrible atheists. It's not a worldview. It's not a belief. It is the rejection of a belief. Just like people who do not believe in leprechauns are all leprechaunistes. People who don't believe in unicorns are.
Well, let me jump in again, because
the problem is leprechauns are not a basis for a worldview, and unicorns aren't a basis for a worldview. They don't provide grounding for your entire epistemology and ethics. So that's a total category error on the atheist part here.
What you're saying is not in the scholarly literature. There is a belief of atheism, which is a belief that God never existed and that the universe came into existence from itself, but
Robin, the best you could do is moral outrage, but you can't explain the moral outrage that you have.
It is a positive, affirming rejection of God. So Pergamon and X-Line actually made this distinction very clear in their recent research. They published a paper in 2025. So there is such a thing as closed atheism. So I think the reason why I think this is an important point is because there's often this sort of bait and switch when you have conversations with atheists, like, well, wait a second, I don't actually believe in anything, so you can't argue against me, right? So I just want to make that point because I think it's an important one. I think at some point you have to stake your claim in something.
Right, because you'd have, and then, even if, hold on, Odin. Yeah, so isn't Odin part of a pantheon? So if there are multiple gods, you can't actually know what grounds truth in that world where there's a bunch of gods where limited powers can live and die and get sick and get drunk and have sex. I mean, maybe that was just the Greek gods, but also, I've only met one Odinist in my life, and I was shocked that I met him. You have to make a principled construct in order to give reasons why you reject an idea.
Well, right. My claim is that there's no evidence. There is no positive evidence of God.
Okay. So once again, why do you stick with what is true and give value to what is true rather than what is false when you could be imagined that there's a universe entirely made of matter, you got shapes, you got beings walking around, and yet there is no prescriptive value to anything whatsoever? You can imagine that scenario. Why don't we live in that scenario? Why do we live in a world with value?
Well, I believe conscious beings give value to their universe.
Okay.
I mean, but that's just me.
Why?
That's just me. Well, that's where meaning comes from, is from minds.
Why?
Because
did you catch that? That's where meaning comes from. She says, I am outraged at the lack of morality. Your worldview denies the necessary preconditions for morality. Your worldview just says that we are just physics in motion and we can't make any third-person identification of what is happening on a moral level in a material world. Are you a theist now? Like, how does that work? Where does the prescriptive basis come from, if not a person?
Mind consciousness is where I don't see.
If meanings come from minds, we have a universe of meaning. Where does the universe come from?
I don't know where the universe comes from.
A mind.
You just said meaning comes from minds. The key is in what you said.
Okay. I don't know where the universe came from.
But you agree it has meaning.
Yeah. You said the universe has meaning.
The universe has meaning because we endow it with meaning.
So before we were here, the universe didn't have meaning.
Sure. Yeah.
So from meaninglessness, meaning comes.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful?
So I want you guys to like record yourself saying gibberish into a camera and then wait until meaning arises from the gibberish that you said in your recording.
I think that that's sublime.
KJ, brother.
It's
KJ.
it's 4
You
on
see
1
what we're
right now.
saying?
It's 4
It's
on
not
1
about.
right
It's
now.
not.
How do you know what my worldview is? Because if you had a personal basis for your ethic that was transcendent and could make judgments and value claims and had purpose for this world, then you would be a theist. But if you're an atheist, then you can't make any of those claims because you would deny the necessary preconditions for the moral outrage you're having right now. Give me an alternative. Either morality is real or it's not. If it's not, you have no complaint. If it is, you're theistic. Ultimately, if it's going to make any sense. Good exercise for understanding repentance brings fairness into it. Same day you were born, a child born with no eyes. That person raised his hands to heaven every day, thanking God for his life. That's true. Shapiro says, I'm a precept follower of the transcendental E. Is that just like a figure in a mathematical equation? Yes, certainty exists. He said, from meaninglessness comes meaning. I know. No, significance comes from a mind, but the mind gives meaning to things. So the problem is, if you use your mind to produce gibberish, does the gibberish also produce meaning because the gibberish is meaningless? And then if your mind gives meaning to things, does your mind give meaning to itself? We had kind of a chicken and egg problem here, because the mind didn't always exist in this guy's world. So the mind would have had to have thought meaning into itself in order for the mind to have meaning, and then have that mind give meaning to other things besides itself. Robin Webster says assertions. Now, when she says assertions, what that means is that you ought to back up what you claim. Where does that ought come from, Robin? This is just, I think this is pretty much inescapable. But Some Ting Wong, yes, I remember the Some Ting Wong meme. Certainty says, Church of Jesus Christ or the Church of I don't know.
About 4 on 1. It's not about 4 on 1.
It's definitely 4 on 1. So what?
It's not 4 on 1 because we're all having one-on-one conversations with you, KJ.
We're just
I
watching.
mean, they're sequential.
If it helps, I'll mute myself. But I thought I had an interesting angle in terms of like moral mapping, because what you're saying is people ought. If you say I follow the evidence, what you're saying is there is a prescription for what is true over what is false. I ought to follow what is true over what is false. But the problem is that can't make any sense in an atheistic universe because you're making a value claim. It is entirely imaginable of a world where things are true or false, absent of value. So taking that scenario, you have to determine for yourself why you think there are these invisible value assignments to people, survival, ideas, truth. And I don't see the evidence for that from an atheistic standard.
I don't see the evidence for that from a Christian standard either.
Can I ask?
Okay, so then all that would do was make a tie. If I grant what he's saying, all that would do is that we have two equally unhelpful worldviews. And I'm going to choose unhelpful worldview A, even though it has no leg up on unhelpful worldview B. So I would ask him, what reasons would you have to choose unhelpful worldview A over unhelpful worldview B? What is the factor that would prescribe you to reason to choose one over the other? And I don't think there's an answer possible for that.
So minds do come from matter, and that is sublime. That is the God I worship. Is that minds can come, like consciousness can come from chemistry. This was a line on day 3 said in his video, and it is truly.
Okay, say prove your God exists and has control over objective morality, then I will concede. Okay, to ask me for proof, again, is to prescribe meaning to reality, to say that I ought to believe what is true, to say that I ought to be accountable for my words. These are a bunch of assertions that in your worldview are impossible. So let's even say that I can't prove to you definitively, at least to your satisfaction, that, I mean, I would argue that the Bible is proof internally to my worldview, but you wouldn't accept that because you don't accept the Bible as proof. Fair enough. So let's say prove your God exists and has control over objective morality. Well, I would say that God's character as the grounds for objective morality, and yet because he owns everything, property rights allow him to do whatever he wants with his own stuff, which includes you and I. And then also, when you say all these things, again, your worldview, my worldview, even if wrong, at least has an explanation for the reality that is morality. Your worldview, you assert morality without the possibility of it. So if you want to go with preponderance of the evidence based on how we live every day as human beings, you would have to at least leave the one you currently have and maybe be in limbo, even if you don't accept mine. But what you can't do is have a moral grandstand on top of an atheistic soapbox. It's impossible.
Truly interesting, truly divine, truly sublime. That
nice way to say you can't. I have explored the arguments, Robin, and here's what's going to boil down to for you, Robin, because I have really tried to work on the arguments, and proof is not persuasion. You already know in your conscience that you have purpose. You already know that in your conscience that God exists. Romans 1 is clear about that. But what I can tell you for sure is all atheists will retreat to is a faith-based claim of it just is. When you bring forth so many things about like, hey, you need a personal source. You need a personal source that's not just mono, but how you put this, it has to be triune. It has to be the triune God, because that would answer the question of the one and the many. And there's only one triune God, and that's the God of the Bible. So that's why you have a basis for interpersonal love, would be the God of the Bible. You don't have that with Allah. You don't have that. You don't have grounding of truth with Hinduism, with the thousands of gods, and that they reject reason and Western thinking in terms of logic. You don't have that in Buddhism, where they are atheistic. So for those same reasons of them being atheistic, they don't have a basis for any of these things. Judaism is an empty husk without Christ, because it's supposed to point to Christ. And Isaiah 64:6 says that we have no righteousness of our own. It would have to be a text that at least claims that it is divinely inspired and without error and without any fallibility. You would have to have a basis that goes all the way back. It can't be a new religion. It can't be anything that was made 5 minutes ago, because if it has no history and it just sprung out of nowhere, that means that not only would we not have known what was true for thousands of years, but any other religion that comes after that religion would also have the same standing, because it's also new and has no history. And any religion that would come after that would make a third religion that you would have to account for. So it has to go all the way back. Otherwise, you would have an infinite progress, I guess, going forward, in which you would have to consider every religion that anybody's ever going to invent ever. So there's multiple reasons that narrow it down to Christianity being the one true religion, not the least of which is the fact that it has the explanation of where justice goes when somebody receives mercy from God. So outside of that, there really is no room to go to. Fundamentally, Robin, I can say as much as I want. You won't accept it. You will just declare brute facts. You will put up your walls, and you won't listen unless God does something in your heart, Robin. And I can make all these arguments that you want, but arguments aren't going to reach you, because what's the issue is at the heart. The head is a distraction. What it is an attitude of the heart. You know that morality exists. We've already established that, so you're not going to be able to take that back. You know that morality exists. You know that we have worth. You know that we have a conscience. You know that humanity is valuable. You know that life is valuable, and you know that there are oughts for how we ought to use our mind, and ought to use our lives, and ought to use our words. And you keep acting like you're not knowing this, and you are. And it's an act. It's just a pose. That is not the world we live in. We live in a world of beauty and meaning. We also live in a world of sin, death, and corruption. And we can look at the world and objectively be true when we say, this is not right. This is not the way it should be. How can you say that unless you're comparing it to the way it should be?
That pure evolutionary methods can create minds from matter. I think that is a much deeper.
Where have you seen?
Oh my gosh! Evolution explains moral progress. What? Okay, who do you think commits more evil, animals or humans?
Deeper.
Here, this is where have you seen anywhere that one thing became another thing? In the macro evolution, what we're speaking on in regard to what you're saying, where in life have you seen that happen? Like, so when has a banana became a strawberry?
It never.
Okay, I gotta admit, that is not what evolution is. Evolution is not individual ideations transforming into different individual ideations. Evolution is presented as populations over time through genetic drift and adaptation and non-maladaptive mutations, different pressures. That's what over time selects for better survival. Oh, that is the evolutionary theory. It's not one thing transforming into another. So I've since a teenager have encountered evolutionists who have taught me how that actually works, and I wouldn't use that approach when engaging discussions in evolution. And I don't even very much engage discussions in evolution because it comes down to, once again, the people resisting the Holy Spirit.
A banana has never become a strawberry. So you're fundamental. I can't explain. I'm not a biologist, but I can't explain all of evolution to you. If you believe that God sacrificed himself to himself for a 3-day weekend because a lady ate an apple, that is your belief. And there is absolutely zero.
Robin says, it always comes down to something broken in the unbeliever because you have no actual answers. I gave you a ton of logical answers, and as it appears, you don't want to hear any of them, nor do you want to acknowledge any good points, even on a logical basis, from which I eliminated what can't be true. So, I mean, I'm just noting the fact that you're not even saying anything like, oh, that makes sense. You cannot have an infinite progress of new religions into the future and have any of those be true without any history going very far back, like Christianity via Judaism does.
Evidence of that, and it's an absurd belief. So what, you know,
absurd.
So now trying to turn it back on
Why
me
is
and
that
saying
absurd
all
belief?
science is false is not going to work. You can't just say all of that you deny all of science.
The problem is I can even grant you. Sorry. The problem is I can even grant you science, but you can't grant yourself any direction. I can give you the keys to the car, but you can't make the car go anywhere until you make a value claim, and your value claims are all assumed, and you have a circular problem between whether or not minds give meaning or lack of meaning gives minds. So if lack of meaning gives minds, then where does the mind derive its meaning from if it came from meaninglessness?
Through evolution. Through evolution. Through evolution, we evolved from single-celled organisms into the
complete just so story.
The huge array of life that we see before us today, including all the minds of cetaceans, my favorite animal, the foxes, owls.
So it's called. Rob Webster says millions of Christians accept evolution. I'm sure many of self-ID Christians accept evolution. The question is, do they believe in sin when they say, you know, that they're a Christian, or do they just say, are these just cultural Christians who show up at church just because that's the cultural thing to do in their old country or in their village? Like, that doesn't mean that just because people self-ID as Christians, that therefore that's Christian doctrine or is aligns with the Bible. Is prescription made of matter?
We're all made of matter.
Is prescription made of matter?
I don't know what that means.
Okay, are moral laws made of matter?
I think their values. I think their truth state. They. You can argue. You can argue about those. They're statements. So I don't think.
Bye, Robin. We have disagreements, but you are always welcome. And I do want to engage on like a one-to-one basis in terms of like, you know, that. But I think if it's anything like this chat, I don't think it's really going to go anywhere, because it's just you're saying that you ought to be consistent, and you're giving a value claim to consistency. Well, I've done it. I've done it so many times. I think you get the gist. So
math is matter, for example. I don't think math is matter. So I don't think statements are matter.
Ought I believe that 2 + 2 = 4?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then even within the realm of math, I am bound to believe what is true and eschew what is false.
You can believe whatever you want.
I'm not talking about what I can do. I'm talking about what I ought to do, which is what you invoke when you say follow the evidence or anything like that.
Sure. I'm so like, I think you're using the word ought in a moral sense. I think it's a good idea to follow what is true.
That's a value claim to say, like, even if you say, oh, well, the recognition that 2 + 2 is 4, that's not a moral claim. Okay, really? So if I'm a teacher and I teach kids at your school that 2 + 2 is 5, have I done something immoral? Oh, well, yes. Well, hold on. I thought 2 + 2 is 4 is a moral claim. Well, you shouldn't lie. You shouldn't lie. But 2 + 2 is 4 in isolation is not a moral claim. Okay. If I find out that 2 + 2 is 4, ought I adhere my mind to that fact? You're going to say yes. What is the ought there? Aren't I bound to adhere to what is true? Not that, okay. Some people might say, oh, well, does that mean that if it's true that there's a distant, undetected star somewhere, that I am bound to know that thing? It's like, well, no. What I'm saying is the facts that you encounter in your life, you ought to accept them as they become within your awareness, right? Not that you are committing a sin by not being omniscient. Nobody is omniscient. We're not made to be omniscient. The question is, when you are aware of a truth, how do you encounter that? How do you deal with it? How do you incorporate that into your life? Value claims are moral claims.
Okay, all right, fine. So, I think it's benefits the organism.
Cool. Robin says, cool. It would be better without your cheerleaders. Well, Robin, I think if I went into a Pangburn Open forum there, it would be just be an 11-on-1 struggle session there too. So I think that everybody's got their scene.
To believe true statements.
Can I offer something right quick? Can I offer something really quick? KJ, you keep saying
certainty. You're saying Robin's not tracking the conversation. I mean, I think that I don't think she is not intelligent. I just think that she is just blind to the issue, because it's like I was saying with Simos. Simos said, if you could see chimps exhibiting reciprocity with each other in these experiments, therefore you could prove that chimps were moral. But the problem he didn't understand was the circular reasoning was reciprocity is moral because reciprocity is moral. He didn't actually make an argument for why it's moral. He just showed there was an experiment where they did a thing. Then he called the thing moral and then declared the experiment conclusive on morality. And that's I think she's doing the same thing and she doesn't realize it.
You're an atheist.
Yeah, we got more people too, so.
And you keep saying you don't have a worldview, but everything you say, you do make positive claims about the universe.
No, I did not say I did not say I don't have a worldview.
I am still speaking, KJ.
I did not say I don't have a worldview. I said atheists do not share a worldview.
All right, guys.
KJ,
all right,
you
guys.
need to let me finish my thought.
Hold on. All right, I'm muting both people. Hey guys, let's get one at a time, one speaker at a time. Let's just continue the conversation.
Thank you, Big Babe Mama. How was Maud's stream? Did she finish strong in the stream? Was there more painting?
I didn't mute you, Examination. You're quiet right now.
I know. I'm just trying to be a help of a calming presence, hopefully.
Hey, you're in the middle of them.
I'm surrounded. Crossfire.
All right, I'm gonna unmute KJ first, and I'm gonna unmute random. Okay.
I'm simply asking to finish my thought, right?
Of course.
You can say anything you want contra what I say after I finish my thought, KJ. That's how adults have conversations. Now,
Oh, brother.
you make positive statements about the world, and all of your claims come from secular humanism. They don't come from existentialism, objectivism, absurdism, or nihilism. You are literally a secular humanist. Now, when I make arguments against the secular humanist worldview, which contains all of atheism, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing.
I do have a worldview, so I have a worldview. I do not think all atheists share a worldview. The only
He said atheism isn't the worldview and just changed it to atheism doesn't share a worldview. When you're nervous, you start to squirm.
thing atheists share is a non-belief in God.
Do you mind if I just
worldview.
do you mind if I say a couple of words to KJ just before, because I feel like we are going to wrap up this part of the conversation.
Right,
and I know other
right.
people are going to hop up. But KJ, I guess I just want to say like maybe 3 or 4 things to you. First of all, like I want you to know, like I respect you a lot for a lot of different reasons. I think you're very intelligent, especially after reading your book. But also, I think I really resonate with where you're coming from. Okay, now I purely and assertively believe in science, but the problem that I got to is science works perfectly within the universe. We cannot apply science to anything outside of the universe without making essentially very wild conjectures.
Oh, and by the way, everybody should go check out On Day 3 and Tavos on Aubrey. I should probably put their links in the chat. I don't know if Shapingro's still out there. Maybe he could do it before too long here.
So this is the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is a little bit more. Well, let me start by saying this. Historically, there are at least 7 different people within one generation who wrote down letters or books saying that Jesus resurrected or performed healing miracles. Okay. Now, if you go out to 100 years, then it's about 15 or 16 people who are writing this. Okay. If you go just over 100 years, then the Jews give you some harmonious testimony about that, as do the Romans, as do other people, and then there's some congruent testimony around that. I couldn't find any other situation in ancient history, specifically classical antiquity, okay, when I looked very rigorously, where there was any sort of similar attestation behind anyone as a healer. Then,
by the way, Tavo Sanabria does have an argument he calls CTF, which is basically a deductive argument of which religion has the most evidence backing it. And there is a distinct, huge differential between what Christianity has as far as historical evidence and backing, as opposed to any other religion there is out there.
Next best examples that you can find from the entire Greco-Roman period, which is a period of about 1300 years, is Vespasian. And he was an emperor, and he got two people to say that, okay? And one of them said it sarcastically. So why is it there were 14 people who were saying something about Jesus, and there's no other ancient figure in all of Greco-Roman, all of the classical antiquity, all the Greco-Roman period, all of those 1300 years, who has any similar, historical testimony behind them at all? Like, in other words, if you go to the next highest comparator to Jesus, they drop way off in the evidence that they have. Now, that may not be enough evidence for you, but for me, it was at least enough evidence to start engaging with reading the scriptures and taking them on a somewhat more neutral perspective. Now, the very last thing that I want to say is, I actually think you're so much of a mirror image for where I was just a few years ago that I really feel like at some point you really are going to get to where I am.
If you guys didn't know, Tavo Sanabria spent decades as an atheist himself, and now he's in a totally different position. Also, I want to hit up real quickly a debate I was watching between Eric Hernandez and a couple atheists, because I wanted to see if two atheists at once could handle what I was bringing. But I did it with super chats. I couldn't be on the show.
What is the evidence point, correct?
The evidence for what?
For anything you believe.
Being true?
Yep. Would you agree that we should follow the evidence where it leads?
That is generally how I think.
I would say I would like to think, I always think that. I have a super chat here. Let me just read that. Why does truth plus reality prescribe what we ought to think? Why ought we value truth over lies if there is no prescription for benefit?
We shouldn't. I don't think you can get ought from an is. I think Hume settled this.
As Stefan Molyneux pointed out, so I ought not get an ought from an is. The ought is if I get an ought from an is, I've done what I ought not do. That's the problem. So if the totality of Hume's actual argument is just because you can say something is doesn't mean you can derive any oughts from it. Therefore, the entailment is I ought not derive an ought from an is. And yet that's all atheists have left in terms of, Tag, the transcendental argument for God, goes from the angle of you can't think or have rationality unless God, specifically the God of the Bible, exists. Kokoshuko, I want benefits too, especially Blue Cross. However, the problem with that is not a single atheist in this entire world lives like you can't get an ought from an is. They do it all the time. That's why I asked the question the way I did. Ought we follow the evidence? Well, you can't get an ought from an is. The problem is he used logic and inferences to determine what you can and can't do. Because if I derive from an ought from an is, I've made an error, which means there's a prescription to how we ought to think about things.
I agree with you. So would you say there are no oughts in the natural world?
Objectively, no.
So would you hold to subjective morality?
Of course.
So you wouldn't say that objectively slavery, owning black people as slaves, is wrong?
If you are not prepared to engage on slavery, do not bring up slavery. Because slavery has to do with not a moral law, because it's not moral to legally own somebody, but in a civil law sense, there was a civil law that respected it in the ancient Near East, even in Israel. So you want to be very careful with that. Check out my debate with Aidan Linden on slavery. Kokoshuko. Okay, Kokoshuko. Have you been on a show before? Would you like to jump up and we can discuss that? I'm probably saying things a little quickly, just assuming that people are going to get it. But here's what I'm saying is, if a philosopher says you can't get naught from it is, and then I listen to him, and then I see what he's saying, therefore, what I've done is, if I accept that idea, I have formed a rule in my mind that recognizes something in reality. And I've conformed my mind to something that I believe is real, which is that if the nature of what is doesn't tell me what I ought to do, then therefore I can't make up rules just based on something existing, right? So if you're an atheist and you think, well, just because you're a human doesn't mean I have to respect your life. The human part is the is, and the respect of the life is the ought. But if you're an atheist, there's only humanity and there's no ought. So the respect your life part is completely unfounded and it can't sustain itself. So now all I've got is you're a human, and that's a descriptor claim. Everything is a descriptor, not a prescriptor. So that's it. There's no telling me what to do. There's no telling anybody what to do because there is no to do to talk about. So Kokoshuka says, not right now. That's fine. You don't have to jump on. I'm just trying to clarify.
Objectively.
I will say I very much believe it's wrong.
It's not what I asked him. Would you believe that you...
How does an atheist believe anything is wrong? Because if they use reason to believe something is wrong, that means that there is something outside of themselves that they have assessed in order to lead them by the evidence to believe that something is wrong for anybody to do. So if I ask them, did you use reason to come to your morality? They have to say yes, because they have to say reason is everything, ultimately, or at least most things. If they say no, then I'd say, why do you hold to it then? Like, if you didn't use reasons for it, I mean, that's just a pretty simple fork in the road for them.
Cannot say it is objectively, universally wrong.
Universally, is it as universal as the laws of physics that it is wrong?
The problem is there's no free will at exercise with the laws of physics. There is free will at exercise with the laws of logic and laws of morality. So I can make a fallacy and logic still exists. I can make I can have a sin that I commit and morality still exists as an actual thing, but I cannot break physics because matter is perfectly obedient to physics because it's not a moral agent in the first place. It's just a physical thing that is bound to nature's laws.
To own black people as slaves?
I'm going to ask it the same way again.
I was not, Eric would not have handled, Eric didn't handle things the same way I would. I threw in a few more super chats, so I want to jump those in because his answer is very telling.
Can anyone in power do whatever they want?
I can ignore empathy.
With morally, I'm going to read some super chats if that's all right. Get your thoughts on this. Someone says, if morality is subjective, then no one's moral mapping is based on reason. No one's secular ethic is justified in their own terms. There's a couple more this guy sent, but I don't know if you want to say anything to that.
Why would my morality not be based on reason?
Because nothing is worth anything in your worldview. You just said that morality is subjective. Therefore, if morality is subjective, nothing has value intrinsically. It's only what you personally think about things in your moral mapping. Hey, Peter. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. We've been reviewing more interactions where I'm testing out my moral argument. And we really, in most of my encounters, I've tried to work some things out with the moral argument. We never really seem to leave the ground floor. We really never seem to press into some of the deeper issues. So I think, the ground floor with this so far has been pretty strong in terms of exposing incoherent parts of atheist morality and atheist prescriptions of why we ought to obey their worldview and not anybody else.
I have plenty of reasons to believe that if you steal from me, it impacts me negatively. I have plenty of reasons to believe that if you murder my wife, it's going to impact me and my kids.
Okay, that's dark, but I will say this: murder is a morally loaded term. Murder is unjustified killing. You would have to have a system of justice that's actually real before that. And if you say the government is a system of justice, then you can't make an argument against slavery, because slavery was endorsed by this very government many years ago.
To believe that if you steal from me, it impacts me negatively. I have plenty of reasons to believe that if you murder my wife, it's going to impact me and my kids and everyone who knows her negatively. That's a lot of reason to believe that I shouldn't prefer these things.
Okay. The question is, why should you? What is there an actual value to anybody's life or well-being or any of that? If there is, how is that possible if it's grounded in impersonal stuff? The answer is there's no evidence that you can derive value from impersonal things. So he would have to say that everybody, himself included, would be deriving their value from impersonal things that don't make value judgments, because that's all he has left. That's all any atheist has left.
What are you talking about?
There are consequences.
Here is
and this is like the elevator pitch for the argument against slavery being endorsed by Christianity. Ephesians 6:9 says, "Not to threaten your slaves." I'm just gonna let him read it.
He has two more, and I can read them back to back. Ephesians 6:9 says to not threaten your slaves. Slavery without coercion is just a legal fiction, not real slavery. 1 Corinthians 7:21 says slaves should leave if possible. And then he says, if there are no prescriptive oughts, then no one can say you have to justify any claim ever, because an unjustified claim is of equal value as a justified claim. The debate is over.
Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Why do I have to justify any claim I make ever? What is the demand upon my mouth, my life, my mind, my conduct? I can just make claims all day long. And since you can't get an ought from an is, you can't tell me that I ought to stop making unjustified claims. Why is my justified claim worse than a justified claim if you're not making absolute value statements about human conduct?
So let's talk about the verse where you can beat your slave as long as they don't die. Let's talk about the verse. Let's talk about the verse.
Yeah, okay. That again is civil law in ancient Near East adapting to what humans were at the time. If you took somebody from the ancient Near East and you brought them into a board meeting, good luck having them adapt to, why is a woman here? All this kind of stuff, right? So because of the hardness of hearts, as it says in Matthew 19, Moses allowed for you to divorce your wives. And that's just one example. These were a hard-hearted people. God did not choose a righteous, wonderful people because they were wonderful and righteous. He chose them because he just chose them. There was nothing in and of themselves that caused God to choose the Jews as the people of Israel. He did, though. So this is not a description of what God thinks you ought to do or what is morally available to you, because Matthew 19 makes it clear that Moses allowed these things in a civil law context, but they do not reflect the moral law of God. I mean, people understand this all the time. If these guys vote, what they're saying is, I want the laws in this country to change. Why? Because they don't fit an absolute transcendent morality that is guiding my conscience to tell me that these laws are unjust. And that it's not just because they're agreed upon or we got some social contract that justifies them. No, those laws are still in judgment. What does that mean? That tells me that even in atheist minds, they understand that there is such a thing as a moral law that transcends and by which we judge other people's laws and cultures, and a civil law, but is subject to change because of moral law and pragmatic reasons that are not necessarily in themselves moral. For example, like corporations aren't actually people. They're just not. Even if we use a legal fiction in order to protect essential freedom, but that's just a patchwork. That's not an actual anthropology or epistemology to say that corporations are people.
This is where you can pass them down to your family members to next
You're
generations.
talking about indentured servitudes where it's not
I'm talking about
justifying-
chattel slavery.
First of all, chattel slavery was, if you're talking about ones where you can end your slave's life or you can mercilessly remove body parts from them or something like that, that was not allowed. You'd be put to death for that in the Old Testament. And I have a couple more super chats I threw in. There was one last one that he didn't actually show, but since the guy asked me how is his morality subjective or
okay.
Yeah, sure. I don't mind.
or at least irrelevant.
Same guy from earlier says your morality is not based on reason because there's no transcendent tiebreaker between what you value and the complete contrary. And he also says, part 2, ergo, not based on reason. If it were based on reason, your value claims would be objectively morally true. Since you deny it, your moral mapping is not based on reason. Is what this person is arguing.
Okay, I mean, none of that's true. I mean, if
just not true.
Okay, they'll just say not true, but they're in a corner. Absolutely, they're in a corner.
I the way I explained the game of chess earlier, I value.
Okay, so they're using a goal-based ethic. I reject a goal-based ethic because then what would happen is, let's say you have somebody who has a goal, and you say you have somebody who has the contrary of that goal. Is it possible to have a morally bad goal? If it's not possible to have a morally bad goal, what are we even talking about here? We're not making value claims. We're just talking about, that's just a descriptor claim all over again. If it is not a question of what is absolutely morally right and wrong for free will agents to choose, then we're not talking about morality anymore, even if we use the label morality. It was kind of like when I was having the debate with T-Jump, and he was saying that morality doesn't have to be prescriptive. Then why can't physics be morality? Well, it turns out he believes that physics are morality. What are we even talking about anymore?
I value human well-being.
Why? Do you value human well-being because of your internal feelings? Or do you value human well-being because it is a justified true belief that human beings are valuable? Am I wrong? Where's the middle in between these things?
Value my wife being alive. I value the happiness of my kids and friends. It is objectively true. If my wife were murdered, it would be negatively impactful for all those things. That doesn't mean it's objectively true no one should murder my wife. In the same way, it's objectively true that matter decays and energy decays, like the second law of thermodynamics.
I agree. Your wife's life is way more valuable than how matter decays. 100%.
Thermodynamics. Those aren't the same. Those aren't equivalent.
I agree. Your wife's life and your well-being are much more important than how matter decays in the universe. They're much more significant and worthy of much more consideration. But that goes to Christ's side, not the atheistic side.
Things.
So if you want to leave the evidence for the resurrection for the next time, I'm totally fine with that.
Sure.
And I know you said you have to go. So I always like to let my guests have the last word. And I always like to, aside from that, ask if you guys mind if I prayed to end this.
That's nice of him to pray. I can't imagine how the atheists felt about that, but they were good sports and they let him pray about it. So that was good. Couple more things. I wanted to hit up on, if we're going to talk about morality, I want to talk about force doctrine because let me see if I can actually get that link. Oh yeah, hold on. When I was on Missing Mods stream, Grid Motorsports came up actually, and Grid wanted to talk about DebateCon and the debate event that he was going to be happening, and then at some point, oh yeah, I'm just going to have to start from here.
The curse, and there are terrible things in this life. This is not heaven, brother. This is not heaven.
Yeah, but it needs a little. I get where you're going with that. But you need a little bit more elaboration to kind of explain.
Now, I like AI because then I can say, where does force doctrine come up? That way, I don't have to like search until Kingdom Come in order to understand what I'm trying to present here. Topic of force doctrine, right about 356.43.
Could you expound on Andrew Wilson's force doctrine? I think it's problematic.
Oh, force doctrine. I love the force doctrine. Yeah, that's
He was the force doctrine, Luke.
I believe in force doctrine. I think I've seen it throughout exercise throughout my life. As a matter of fact, I see it every day on the kindergarten playground when the bigger kid pushes the bigger kid down and, pardon me, the smaller kid down and takes whatever he wants, and the little kid can do nothing about it. The same thing happens when we look at the dynamic between men and women and children and smaller children. So
we can agree that's an apt descriptor, right?
Yeah.
But you wouldn't say that that's necessarily a comment on the moral realm, right?
On morality?
Yeah. You would say that that's a separate issue from force doctrine and what force doctrine is as a mere descriptor.
It's a description of the is, not an ought, right?
Correct.
Well, doesn't force doctrine also involve this idea?
Yeah. So I hold on. I want to address that.
Hold on, bro. I'm still gonna ask a question. Like,
go ahead.
Doesn't it also involve this idea that feminism is failing because men have force and men control force? Isn't?
Yeah, men control force. Yeah. Well, I mean,
right.
ultimately, So ultimately, men control force. Correct? Is there any disagreement with that?
I don't think so.
Ultimately, men control force.
I don't think
as long as we're talking about on average, you can obviously find examples where that's not the case, but on average,
yeah. But ultimately, if you reduce it down far enough, ultimately, it's going to be a dude standing there, right?
What would the
maybe the biggest dude that we've ever seen on the planet, but ultimately,
it is going to be a big belly guy holding the big stick. Yeah, I grant you that.
Right,
yeah, absolutely.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
On average.
So if we just take that as a starting point, and I don't necessarily, conflate the two with, I don't conflate that with morality in and of itself, because that is just is. It just is true. There's no getting around that. Ultimately, force doctrine will boil down to a dude or a pair of dudes or three dudes or whatever.
Or a guy and a girl and two pizza places and a billy goat.
Whoa.
Say what they say goes.
Kokoshuko, Papa Shango, why not the Capable Person Act? What do you mean by the Capable Person Act? I'm lost.
Males control force. Interesting.
Grid, the reason I bring this up is because a lot of times the phrase might makes in reference to force doctrine, like
might makes right. Yeah.
What it's often paired.
Might makes.
Right.
Yes. The correct saying is might makes. It
right. That's what I'm saying.
Right. It doesn't make wrong. It just
let me clarify where I'm coming from, because it's often that might makes. I get that. It makes sense, but it's often paired with the phrase there are no rights or rights don't exist. And that is a moral claim, which is in a separate realm from the descriptor of power dynamic circumstances. So that's, if you see my debate with Andrew on force doctrine, I zero in on that from the beginning using Bible verses that refer to rights absent of power dynamics.
Right. Okay. So go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Never mind.
No, you go ahead.
I don't know that I'm willing to grant all of that. I can grant a couple of things. I can grant that a lot of people would agree that that is morality, but I don't believe that that makes a morality. First of all, I don't find anything particularly moral in any of it, right? So that's just me, though. Okay.
I was about to say that's.
So you agree that might does not produce anything in the moral realm? It's just circumstances of power dynamics.
Yeah, it defines the power dynamic. And then once we get, and which, so in and of itself, there's no more, there is no morality. There's no, it's easier to describe or proscribe motive, right? To that. And now we start getting into morality. So you have motive. What's the, is it moral or immoral? What motive of using this force dynamic do you have?
Okay, so why talk about this? Is it to raise awareness that, hey guys, look, we're all under threat of violence, and that's why we're all in line, and we should change the system? That would be like a fruitful direction. Is that what you're doing?
I don't think he's going for the shoulds. I think he's saying anybody who holds the gun is in power. Full stop.
Well,
and guys hold the gun.
What's the point of talking about that? Why are you talking about it?
I think they're doing it to put feminists in an uncomfortable spot.
Oh,
well, so yeah, right. So this is
that makes
sense.
So
when so this is the most common use of force doctrine. There's a lot of uses of force doctrine.
Like
this is the most common use of force doctrine is when women say that they are equal in all aspects to men, or in most aspects to men, or however they want to phrase it, right? Like anytime this word, this concept of equality comes up, and then they take it one step further and say that
The problem is a lot of times when the talk of equality comes up, and I'm just trying to give the best possible counter to that, would be equality of value. And I think both Andrew and Rachel Wilson believe in equality of value as opposed to just, equality of capability, which is totally different. Peter says the moral relativists can't put two sentences together without contradicting themselves. Very true. Seahawk Daddy says, hey, Rex, can you prove that we deserve proof? What do you think this approach to people who demand proof? This approach to people who demand proof. Yeah. So that's one way of phrasing it. Can you prove that we deserve proof? They would just say that you're shifting the burden of proof by asking for proof. But then you would, if it was me, I'd say the burden of proof is an expression of responsibility, which is an extension of absolute morality. Why does responsibility exist? Why are we as individuals bound to and answerable for our actions and the things we say? Coco Shuko, I kind of just yapping. Well, your name is very yappable, Coco Shuko Papa Shango. I can't tell if you're from Japan or if you're from an exotic island somewhere that is not Japan.
the equality is more.
At least that's how it sounds to me. It sounds like Coco Shuko Papa Shango,
moral. It's more. It's there's a morality in this idea of equality between the genders, and then you say, well, okay, maybe that's true, but why? How do you get there? How do you get there? Well, the idea is that women can vote and women can do this and women can do they have all of the same rights as men, and then the question then becomes, well, what if they didn't? And they say, well, no, they do.
I'm Italian, he says. That explains the papa part.
Oh, that's kind of playing the cover for the first, though, right?
Grid, if you don't mind me asking,
Yeah,
is there anybody in all seriousness who thinks that, like, if we accept that there is a distinction, like between not like, let's separate remove the men and women part, but if there is a distinction between males and females, which anybody who's got fucking eyes and ears must acknowledge, right? If you don't acknowledge that there is a distinction between males and females, we can't be the same in all places at all times.
A couple hundred debates I've heard differently.
But it
Probably true. There's probably a lot of feminists who think that you can argue your way into being as strong as a man, as calm as a man, as successful as a man, typically speaking. Not speaking of myself in here, just saying that, not a whole lot of women founded nations and kingdoms and things like that.
It does mean that we must,
which is not a dig on them, it's just that's not what they do.
Be prepared to accept that on average men are better at some things and women are
I
better
agree
at
with you. I do agree with you.
So this notion of course, like, it is the case that if we accept that there is any kind of difference at all, then the acceptance of a difference in the biological realm does mean that we are accepting that Group A on average is going to be better at task A than Group B is going to. Like,
we're not
isn't this
ignoring
just
that.
a truism? Like, I don't even know why.
Yeah, we don't have a problem with that.
It's another is. It's another is. It just is that.
By the way, in doing searching, I think I found out that Eric Hernandez, the guy we were covering previously, is a Molinist. One of these days, I should do a video on Molinism. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but what Molinism attempts to do is solve free will and predestination at the same time by just making it so that instead of Grid Motor Mouth, Zillzone, you just picking fights with everybody. You just go around town, hey, you sucker. That's Zillzone's favorite word in the dictionary, SUQQA, and then just taking out people. But yeah, so Eric Hernandez. Okay, I might have to cover this guy later, because if he is a Molinist fan, if he's a Molinism fan, we're gonna have some issues, me and him, in terms of differences.
Yeah,
Point
it
is
is.
that, and what Andrew Wilson's trying to say
great.
is that feminism is wrong because men.
Yes, do a vid on Molinism. I'm a Molinist until I understand otherwise. Well, Zill, did you go and see William Lane Craig's article where he said God must deal the hands he has dealt? Jess White. How you doing, Jess?
Are the ones who hold the power in the society, like the violent force and stuff?
With respect to physicality, but the reason.
Okay, Zill, here's a problem. You haven't removed predestination from your worldview. You just made it so that instead of God predestines us, now we predestine God. Get at me, bro.
That men do things isn't just motivated by their physical superiority, assuming that's what we're talking about.
But
the reason that a lot of men do things is like men have daughters and they love their daughters, right?
Right. So the argument is specifically used in when in most cases when we're trying to illustrate that when especially feminists will say something along the lines of, but we can force you to do that. We can do this. And like, no, you can't. As a woman, you can't do that. Now, even if you had 100 women, right? But the way that you're going to enforce it is through other men. And therefore, that gives men that monopoly.
Okay, Zilzone says God isn't controlled by counterfactuals. He's just knowledgeable of them. No, he is controlled by counterfactuals because in William Lane Craig's view, there might be people who, no matter what universe you put them in, they would never be saved. And there might be people who, no matter what universe that you put them in, they would be saved. So where is this creative power that makes these people that God could not save by any means, by any circumstances? It must be outside of him to do that sort of thing, which means that there is a natural law that supersedes God in order to limit the kinds of choices he makes. And upon Molinism's economy, it's his creation that limits the possibility of his choices.
On force, which they're using to enact their will or their rules or however you want to. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to express it.
Grid, would you consider yourself an authoritarian?
Me?
Yes.
Not especially. I have a problem with authority for the most part, but I understand that. But that doesn't mean I can't argue the points.
Right. So, are you an authoritarian in your political ideology?
And Zil, when you're asking authoritarianism, I mean, if you took, some people might call you authoritarian if you didn't allow for certain drugs to be available in the market. Certain people might call you authoritarian if you didn't want gay marriage. God actualizes the universe according to his will, says Zilzon. Okay. But anybody can say that. The question is, how do people get to heaven? Is it because of their goodness and their choices? Or is it because of God's mercy and his decreeing? Molinism fails because God must be dependent on some other values to decide which potential world he should choose. Correct. God has some kind of goal, and the limitations on creation to achieve that goal are what guide the path of least resistance that God needs to limit himself to. Kokoshuko. Welcome to the world of theology, Kokoshuko Papashango. Enjoy.
To some degree, because I'm a constitutionalist.
Right. Okay. So you are an authoritarian.
Well, there's degrees of authoritarian because you have to have some element of authoritarianism in your government at some point. So I think there's a lot of room within the word authoritarian that could go.
I don't mind the logo. I mean, look, yes, I absolutely believe that ultimately, if you want to put a point on it, ultimately, I think God is the authority. Unfortunately, he doesn't speak to me very often personally, so then I have to look to something else. So in this case, I look to the Constitution because those are the ideals that I believe in. Now, I don't.
Kokoshuko also, William Lane Craig said in one of his articles that God must play the hand he is dealt. That means there is a divine dealer outside of God that limits the circumstances by which God can make his next move. Told this doc about this Molinism on my back. Yeah, you might want to get that checked out. Molinism's cancer. I think Molinism is more philosophy. Yeah, it's a philosopher trying to counter the Reformation. Zil says, would like to talk about this on panel sometime with you, re-examination show. Yeah, we could do that.
Conflate those ideals with any kind of morality. I would not be willing to say that the Constitution is a set of morals.
Right.
Certainly,
just to clarify, you would agree that there's a difference between the moral realm and the civil realm. And so when you're talking about rights, it's easy to equivocate that are rights enumerated in a law versus rights that are transcendent across time and humanity, right?
I would say that there's no such thing as a moral right. I don't believe that you have a moral right to pretty.
There are such things as moral rights, and we're going to get into that immediately.
Much anything. You do not have a moral right to speak your mind. You don't.
Do you have a do you
Really?
do you believe that theft is
Are
real?
you Christian? Are you Christian or sorry, I'm not understanding.
Well, yeah. Well, I just want do you believe that theft is a real thing? Like
I'm sorry?
like theft, like stealing.
Is it just legally prohibited or is it morally?
Yes, I believe theft is a real thing.
Yeah.
Well, that would be property rights though.
But it's well, I guess, but like,
I don't think there's any way out of that. If you believe theft is real, I mean, if you believe theft is real, then you believe in property rights. Full stop. If you say theft isn't real, then you accept, I would say, an absurd notion. And I think most people would object to that and dismiss that. So I think it's an impossible trap to get out of.
given what you've just said with respect to like, there's like a right to speak your mind isn't a real thing. But if I decided, like, if I'm twice your size and I wanted to take your shit,
No,
right?
Okay,
Like,
so
a
the right
property
to
right's
speak your
real.
mind is a real thing, but it's neither moral nor immoral.
So is a property rights moral or immoral, or are they like irrelevant?
They could be either, because they're granted by men. Men aren't moral. Men are not moral creatures. We're
what? Did I miss that last time?
So is a property rights moral or immoral, or are they like irrelevant?
They could be either, because they're granted by men. Men aren't moral. Men are not moral creatures. We're
they hold up though. What? How could theft be not wrong, or it could be either just made up or real? I guess I missed that last time, or I was just letting the conversation unfold.
That's right.
Men also wrote the Constitution that you.
But theft, I mean, property rights don't come from men, and theft doesn't come from men. It is after, it is responsive, reflexive to an actual moral law that exists. Good says he's a savage kill in the woods. Oh man,
I love so much, kid.
Sure. Yeah.
Well,
and did I describe morality to the Constitution?
No, that's exactly what I'm getting at. But
A little bit.
Here's hold on. Here's my thing though. Do you use reason when constructing a charter for, let's say you want to build a new nation? Do you use reason in order to construct that charter or that founding document?
If I were to, I would look to me personally, I would look to biblical morality, and I would try and construct rules as close to the biblical morality as I could.
Grid, are
I'm
you
not
God?
capable
Are
of
you
such
God, Grid? Are you the one
Zil,
to take
Zil.
exact God's commands?
Zil, calm down.
Is that
Zil,
your
hold on.
job?
Zil, hold on.
No, you can let him go. I don't mind.
No, I know, but I feel like
real quick, if you are interested, I just asked Grok on X, the Who Dealt the Cards critique, White flipping Craig's God Must Play the Cards He Has Dealt line from the Soteriological Problem of Monism in the May 13th, 2014 Dividing Line episode. Older Dividing Line shows are mostly audio on aomin.org. Archives, search there at 2014 Molinism posts. No easily findable timestamped YouTube clip for that exact bit. So, sorry, I wish I had something more instant for you this time, but I don't.
Moral. What I'm trying to say is does that mean that you have subscribed to a moral realism because you're saying that the Bible's moral principles are true?
Yeah, I would say that for me, my morality, the Bible principles are true.
Okay, I will mute and I will listen now.
Okay, so for him, the Bible's true. That's how he takes it. Is that whatever the Bible says, he's going to adhere things basically to that. Now, I think there is some contradictory stuff he brought up in there. And I would also like to, Dr. James White. I would also like to bring up this video, which is a secular ethics video on epistemics. It is called "When is it ethical to believe something without evidence?" And it goes through two separate philosophies that are secular on the topic of knowledge and ethics and how they relate to each other. Kokoshuko says, would God be constrained that way? No, he would not. No, he would not. And actually, it reminds me, I have to compile a list of arguments I have against Molinism, because I do have them out there somewhere, but I haven't put them together in a way that's communicable yet.
People often fight over the substance of beliefs, that is, what particular beliefs we should hold. Believe us when we say raw milk is good for you and will cure all ailments. No.
Oh, by the way, Darth, the Venn diagram between quote unquote Jesus' preference and absolute truth is a circle.
Believe us when we say that raw milk could poison and even kill you. Believe us when we say that universal childcare is better than low-income childcare benefits. No, adopt our belief that we should send $10 billion more to Israel. But before we ask what to believe, some philosophers ask, when should we believe? Or more precisely, when is it ethical to believe something? This is a more fundamental question about how we should interpret the world, and one I find quite interesting. Most people spend time trying to cultivate accurate beliefs because we make our lives meaningful by acting
How about this? Me and Rex debate over Molinism, sucker.
in the world, and so we don't want.
That'd be interesting. Coco, I've heard that it don't make sense for God to go against his nature, but I don't know. Depends on what you're talking about. I mean, we know that it's impossible for God to lie. I challenge you, sucker. Well, give me some time to compile my notes and we can go over that. But yeah.
Want to act upon false beliefs. We want to be sure that the meaning we create aligns with what we intended. This relies on the assumption that it is right or ethical to believe only true things. But what actually makes truth ethical? Is it because truth is intrinsically good, or because truth is instrumental to good consequences? Moreover, what does an ethical belief look like? Due to the influence.
Darth Tyrannus says, truth is now a preference. Truth is a person, Darth Tyrannus. It could be no other way. Otherwise, truth would have no prescriptivity over us, because abstractions cannot own us, cannot tell us what to do not make value claims, do not make judgments, any assertions or assessments. So yeah, truth wouldn't be a preference. It's just that atheists think that if it comes from a mind, therefore it must be subjective, even if it's a universal mind that dictates the world and makes the world what it is. So I'm just going to use your terminology and just still get the same result, even though it's just a rhetoric game. Truth must be grounded. Where is truth grounded? From what I've heard, Darth Tyrannus, also known as Bubblegum Gun, is a theist, but he's not a Christian theist. So he just punches in all directions.
Of the scientific method, you probably think it's ethical to believe whatever has more evidence. So if tons of academic papers, medical professionals, the government health department, and Dr. Mike tell you that raw milk is not safe, then maybe we can ignore RFK Jr. taking raw milk shots. But the standard of believing whatever has more
raw milk shots are the best kind of shots. You don't want it. You don't know what you're missing, lady.
Or evidence becomes tricky when it comes to more conceptual beliefs, such as politics, morality, and religion. For example, how do you weigh evidence for a spiritual belief when spirituality is grounded in faith? As Kierkegaard said, faith is a belief that extends beyond what can be proven by evidence. It is a subjective choice to accept the unknown and trust that there is something larger than oneself. If faith is what gives deep meaning to some people's lives, then maybe we should revisit what we consider to be an ethical belief.
Okay, Darth Tyrannus says truth is an outcome. Does the outcome come from somewhere? Is the thing that it comes from not true?
To help us think through these issues, let's look at two philosophies that argue when it's permissible to believe something. We got evidentialism on one side, represented by W.K. Clifford's essay, The Ethics of Belief, and pragmatism on the other, represented by William James' essay.
Truth is always past tense. When you were in the present saying that, was it true when the moment that you said it, or was it only true after it aged? This is not good, man. Stop it. Get some help.
The will to believe. Let me bring them in.
You. Just you.
You.
Building your app.
You. Talking
on
to
Base
you.
44.
America.
It is wrong always, everywhere, and for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. This is the evidentialist's belief. Yes, hi, that is I. To jog our intuitions here, let me give you a scenario. Suppose a ship owner suspects that his ship might not be safe to sail. He's thinking, oh gosh, this ship is pretty old. It's seen the ocean more than I've seen my children. Ugh, repairing this ship is gonna cost me a lot of money. But as he's thinking, he overcomes these doubts and ends up believing that the ship is safe to sail. Actually,
Seahawk Daddy says, Rex gave me a good idea. I went and asked Grok to prove humans deserve proof of God. That would be a great stream. Seahawk, are you going to start streaming? You should do some Grok interrogations. I've been using Grok to help kind of formulate this, and I've been asking for maximum scrutiny towards my beliefs, and it was pretty clear, pretty fast that they even the most secular type of argumentation believes that the theistic opponent is still objectively required to perform production of evidence for their claims and be held accountable for the claims they make. So I think it's just an inescapable matter of time for atheists when they realize the ethics of demanding proof undercut any argument they could ever have with anybody ever.
the fact that this ship has sailed so many times is good reason to believe
Humans don't inherently deserve proof of God, in bold at the top from Grok. That's right. Boom.
that the ship will sail safely. I mean, that's how probability works, right? Also, God is supposed to be benevolent, and I've been showing up semi-regularly to church. God wouldn't let all those passengers sink. Besides, you can't trust anyone with your ship these days. They'll charge you a fortune just to do a sloppy job. Yeah. The ship is gonna be just fine. The ship owner sincerely believes this. He sends a bunch of people off to sea. A week later, the ship sinks and all the passengers are lost.
All right. So Yuck Daddy says, and it had a line that I am wrestling with. Demanding evidence is a virtue of reason, not a moral right against reality. The problem is, I would ask him, am I bound to think that that is true? Ask him if I ought to think that demanding evidence is a virtue of reason, not a moral right against reality. Darth Rana says, truth has always past tense. You can't say something is true of the future, even if you don't know if it will happen from the premises. The problem is the past was present, and if the past is true because it was the past, then it was also had to have been true within the present. So again, to say truth has always been past tense, like that doesn't really mean anything. You might say that the confirmation of truth for contingent human minds is sensibly confirmed by it being in the past, but that doesn't even make any sense. I mean, there are things that are not true anymore because they are in the past. So there's different kinds of truth. Obviously, there's historical truth, and then there's present truth. There's demonstrable truths of things you can test and repeat, and there's things that you can't test and repeat. Zilzone says, I'd love to see an atheist recreate the conditions for the origin of the universe in the lab. Your models are silly and made up.
People tend to think that the ship owner is guilty in some way. It doesn't matter that he genuinely believed the ship was safe to sail. The belief was false, which caused people to die. In fact, the ship owner knowingly suppressed his own doubts instead of giving them weight or finding external perspectives. Extra guilty behavior. But for evidentialists like I, the problem is not that the ship owner acted on a false belief. It's that he had no right to hold such a belief. Even if the ship ended—
Right is a value claim, by the way. So now to say you have no right is different than saying you have no justification. Now, the question is, ought I believe those true things? Ought I believe that there requires a justification? And what is a justification for a belief? Especially if anybody can make a bold assertion like saying, this is a brute fact, that's a brute fact. Why can't we just endlessly multiply unrelated, impersonal brute facts over everything until we have eliminated the possibility of explanation?
ended up sailing safely, I say that it was still wrong for the ship owner to believe that the ship was safe. The real problem with his belief was not the outcome, but the belief's basis on insufficient evidence. Quote, "When an action is once done, it is right or wrong forever. No accidental failure of its good or..."
Okay, Siak says, is a normative epistemic claim not a moral one? Ask it if you ought to believe that it's a normative epistemic claim and not a moral one. Like, would I be wrong to tell people that it's not a normative epistemic claim and it is a moral one? Would I be forced to change that?
Evil fruits can possibly alter that. The man would not have been innocent. He would only have been not.
I mean, I'm still bound by my responsibility to believe true things, all categories of true things. I'm still bound to believe that 2 + 2 is 4, and I ought not fight against that. And if something say is a normative epistemic claim, not a moral one, well, it's still binding to me on some level that I ought to maintain truth in my head. To say it's not a moral one, I wonder if that's just a secular distinction that's programming. Like, for example, 2 + 2 is 4 is a mathematical thing. The actual math problem 2 + 2 is 4 is neither in and of itself a moral statement about what one ought or ought do, except for the fact that I ought to adhere to the knowledge that 2 + 2 is 4, and I ought not lie that 2 + 2 isn't 4 or is anything other than 4. So there is a binding to how I handle true things. So to say it is a normative epistemic claim is still to say that I'm bound to be honest about that claim. There is a moral relationship to how I, as a free will individual, handle all facts.
Found out. The question of right or wrong has to do with the origin of his belief.
Also, on top of that, is making a value claim about what is real, that I ought to adhere to what is real. So it's making a demand upon my life and my way of thinking, and therefore there is a moral component to that I ought to adhere to.
Not the matter of it, not what it was, but how he got it. If you don't have strong evidence for your belief, then you ought not to believe. It's better to remain in doubt than to believe in something false. One way to interpret the evidentialist argument is to think of it like rule consequentialism. Rule consequentialism says that we should follow a set of rules. If generally followed, it would produce optimal consequences. Thus, an act is wrong if it violates one of those rules. We can use rule
Zilzone says, if our reality is the same reality as tomorrow, as it has been for all time, it is true that 2 + 2 will equal 4 tomorrow. Yes, so that comes down to the problem of what has been called induction, but is, as Shapingro likes to point out, is abduction. Seahawk Daddy says, it gave me a chart. Seahawk, well, hold up a second. Maybe I'll use my grok. I'm going to use my grok to ask it, because I've already formulated a list of arguments and tied them together. I'll ask grok. Yeah, I'm going to migrate over here. Live accountability, people. True or false is the deductive result of the formula. Agreed. Why should I follow what is true? That's a different question. Rex, do you have a reductive argument for future truth? I mean, it would probably have to fall into tag to do that. It would have to be more along the lines of God is the necessary precondition for truth. Truth exists, therefore God exists. So deductive, not offhand, just more of a transcendental argument. And so, but that would be tied to, my neck. It would be tied to more like the religion speed run I used earlier when talking to Robin about what kinds of religion would be true. Moral ought, descriptive, and epistemic normal oughts were the 3 categories. Yes. Okay. So there are moral oughts that you ought not steal. And then there's descriptive ought. The problem with descriptive oughts and epistemic oughts is they are still binding to us. We still have responsibility in both those cases. It's hard to translate that to chat. So you can't, let's put it this way. All right. Under triage, my argument, can moral responsibility be separated from, if I learn how to type, descriptive and epistemic norms. No, under triage, moral responsibility cannot be cleanly separated from descriptive and epistemic norms. The three are structurally intertwined. Here is the precise account. Number one, moral responsibility requires epistemic access. Moral responsibility presupposes the agent can know or reasonably could have known the relevant facts and norms that are being held responsible for. This is an epistemic requirement. You cannot be morally responsible for violating a norm you had no way of knowing existed. You cannot be held responsible for the consequences of an action you had no reasonable access to. The descriptive facts that made those consequences foreseeable. This is why we distinguish between culpable ignorance and non-culpable ignorance. You could not reasonably have known versus you should have known better. Both judgments depend on epistemic norms about what a person in that situation ought to have known or believed. Remove epistemic norms, and the very category of culpable versus non-culpable responsibility collapses. Moral responsibility involves conformity to norms that are both descriptive and prescriptive. When we assess moral responsibility, we evaluate whether an agent's actions and beliefs align with what is the case and what ought to have been done or believed. This evaluation necessarily mixes descriptive norms, facts about what actually happened, what the agent's capabilities were, what information was available, and what the likely consequences would be. Epistemic norms, whether the agent formed accurate beliefs given the evidence available to him. Moral norms, whether the agent's choices and beliefs were permissible or obligatory. Triage holds that these are not three independent layers. Descriptive facts generate prescriptive force. You ought to believe and act in light of what's actually the case. Moral responsibility is one important application of that broader prescriptive structure when persons are involved. 3. The rebellion theorem makes the connection explicit. Triage's rebellion theorem states normative violation to person. Only persons can knowingly violate prescriptions. Moral responsibility is a concept we use to hold persons accountable for such violations. But determining whether a violation was knowing requires accurate description of what the person had believed and did, an assessment of whether or not they could or should have believed or acted differently. So that's descriptive and epistemic right there. Thus, moral responsibility is not separate in domain that can float free of descriptive and epistemic norms. It is the personal second personal application of the same normative structure that governs belief and action more generally. Why attempts to separate them fail. Suppose someone claims moral responsibility is one thing, descriptive facts and epistemic norms are another. We can ground moral responsibility without needing to ground the authority of truth or descriptive reality. The separation runs into immediate problems under triage. To hold someone morally responsible, you must be able to accurately describe what they did and what they knew or should have known. This already relies on the normative authority of descriptive and epistemic norms. If those norms have no objective binding force, then assessments of responsibility become arbitrary or merely conventional. You could not coherently say someone ought to have known better or ought to have done differently. In practice, when we debate moral responsibility in law, ethics, or everyday life, we constantly appeal to what the person could reasonably have believed and what the facts actually were. The separation does not hold in real reasoning. Triage's positive account. Under triage, all three are grounded in the same source. Descriptive reality is prescriptive. Facts carry oughts to be believed accurately. Epistemic norms are the application of that prescriptivity to belief formation, and moral responsibility is the application of the same prescriptivity to persons who can be held accountable in second personal relations. Because the ground is personal, the logos, it can generate obligations that are both epistemic, conform your mind to reality, and moral, be accountable to other persons for how you do so. An impersonal ground struggles to unify these without remainder. Summary, under triage, which is an argument I'm working on, moral responsibility cannot be separated from descriptive and epistemic norms because it depends on the epistemic access to relevance and facts and norms. It evaluates agents according to whether they conform to what is actually the case and what they ought to have believed or done. And the concept of culpable violation, rebellion, inherently links personhood, knowledge, and normative failure. So I would not say that you can get away with saying, well, these are just different norms. These are just different rules. These are all tied together. If you wish to be logical, the only reason to follow truth. It depends on how many things that are real you end up valuing, because you can be logical, but you can be cogent, or you can be valid and not sound at the same time.
Consequentialism to support evidentialism like this. 1. As a general rule, prohibiting beliefs without evidence leads to the best consequences. 2. Therefore, it is always wrong to believe without evidence, even if sometimes it's harmless. Let's break down that first premise. Every belief has some influence on action. Now, some of you are going, nuh-uh, I have some beliefs that stay up.
Moral, accountable to others. Yes, we are ultimately accountable to God for how we use our minds.
Up in my head only. I can separate what's up here from what I actually do. To that, I must disagree. When we make decisions on how we act, it is never a totally open and free choice. Once we believe something, it's impossible to not have that belief influence our actions. After all, the conviction of a belief is what distinguishes belief from mere thought. Quote, no real belief, however trifling and fragmentary it may seem, is ever truly insignificant. It prepares us to receive more of its like, confirms those which resembled it before, and weakens others. And so gradually it lays a stealthy train in our inmost thoughts, which may someday explode into overt action and leave its stamp upon our character forever. When we act on beliefs with insufficient evidence, we cause harm to others and ourselves. We create a bad habit of being dishonest. Society will become credulous and lose.
Okay, so of course, dishonesty means that, it's a reference to the fact that we ought to say things that we believe to be true, or better, know to be true. So, not that we ought to say things at all times. We have to have prudence about what we say and who we say it to. But those are all, again, moral factors based on a value mapping that you have.
The habit of testing things and inquiring into them, for then it must sink back into savagery. There's this domino effect where caring about the truth of our beliefs causes others to care about the truth of their beliefs too. Men speak the truth to one another when each reveres the truth in his own mind and in the other's mind. No one will bother being truthful to you if they know you are careless about your own beliefs. Why engage in good faith discussion with someone if they're just going to defer to the next YouTube short that pops up on their page? This creates a wider culture of carelessness about beliefs. Evidentialism says this is dangerous because beliefs are social products. They are.
See, how Daddy says, I have trepidations about using AI for philosophy. Yeah, theologically, if you don't know the Bible very well, it's going to be hard to put together. But part of what the transcendental argument for God does is it uses the Bible as the basis for its knowledge base and for its value claims. And so if you check the AI's answers by the Bible, then, that would help in order to keep the car on the road. I would also say that, I don't know, as far as I can tell, we are accountable for even the things that we know that in and of themselves don't appear to have any first blush moral value, like 2 + 2 being 4. For example, if I lie about 2 + 2 not being 4 to a bunch of school children, then I am morally culpable for that, even though it's a knowledge-based claim. As long as it says Walter Payton was the greatest. Okay. Because when you use it for sports or music, it does a very bad job. Interesting. I'd have to experiment on that by giving it to an unbiased source. The cool thing is, at least it lays it out in, you can get, I will say this, it's known to be good for programming. If you need to fix a stitch in your computer's programming somewhere or a software.
Not spontaneous thoughts that just pop up in an individual's head. We inherit beliefs from our family, our teachers and friends, cultural products like movies and stories, and the broader social world. The average Torontonian believes that cyclists are annoying and entitled because they're always swerving in and out of lanes. The average person in Münster, Germany believes that cyclists are, wait, what's a cyclist? Isn't that just a normal person? Our words, our phrases,
someone going through a cycle.
Our forms and processes and modes of thought are common property. Thus, we must cultivate a world that is conducive to producing the right beliefs. It's not just academics or politicians that have a duty to hold the right beliefs. We all participate in the flow of ideas. No one is a product of their own thoughts. Belief is not ours for ourselves, but for humanity. I can hear the objectors at the gate, so let me address them. Okay. They are worried that evidentialism defines sufficient and insufficient evidence too strictly. Evidentialism would seem to require us to give up beliefs on.
Darth Rana says, to say truth is a noun is more pagan than me because you need false as a noun too. Falsity is contingent upon truth's reality. Truth itself is not contingent upon any priors.
More controversial matters. In fact, many moral or political beliefs.
Zilzone, I am not a programmer. However, Rev Russ is a full stack developer. So you guys might get along. It said that's a very reasonable trepidation. You're right to have them. So AI says that you should be afraid of AI. Dr. Functional wants to put down the whammons.
Cannot be settled in the way that
Welcome to the show.
evidentialism seems to require. You can always find conflicting evidence on what you believe. Requiring evidence has also historically been weaponized against marginalized knowledge. Recording evidence is often an institutional practice, whether done by the government, museums, or colleges. This disadvantages people who have been excluded from such institutions. Indigenous communities in Canada face a constant battle for legal rights because Indigenous activity prior to British contact is hard to prove with evidence in court. As a result, Indigenous beliefs about how we should relate to the land are still doubted. For a long
I wonder if Dr. Functional just goes into a workplace. It's like in Alabama, you say roll tide. Dr. Functional just says repeal the 19th. It's like reading. Gives a long list of why it can't be relied upon for philosophical discussions. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. However, let's put it this way, Seahawk Daddy. I have asked it to give me the most scrutinous opposition to my argument, and the opposition it's given has, been kind of stalwart in and of its face. Possibly that it's misleading me, but so far the evidence shows, and by evidence I mean actual real life discussion with atheists, is they can't even get off the ground floor and give me a value map by which I ought to do one thing or the other. Darth says repeal the 19th. Here we go. Coming out in droves. Oh no, they fight to get more tax money. Dr. Functional, are you Canadian? Illusion of death. It can sound confident and articulate even when the underlying issues are profoundly unresolved. It can create a false sense of having solved something. Yeah, probably true.
long time, sexual assault cases required elaborate evidence about consent, but consent is rarely recorded, nor does it appear in one concrete form. This evidentiary standard contributed to victims of sexual assault being disbelieved.
I'm going to suggest to you that that encounter was at your instigation and that it was entirely consensual.
I don't know how to respond to that. Many diseases are so under-researched that patients with those diseases don't even have evidence to base their beliefs on. If I have a rare condition that even doctors don't understand, am I supposed to withhold all beliefs about my health? At some point, we have a duty to believe certain things or people, even if the evidence is not fully settled.
We have a duty. Moral claim.
Now, as an evidentialist, I actually agree with that last point about believing even when the evidence is not.
Canuckistani and American. Currently in Canada. Land of the free, home of the slave. Oh, it's Zillzone. We got 3 of them now. Forming like a horde of zombies.
Totally settled. Evidentialism is not as rigid as one might think.
By the way, I'm agnostic on voting and how that should work. I think, oh, that's a face right there.
I don't want to.
I don't know what structure is best. I don't claim to know. Some people say we should be egalitarian. Some people say repeal the 19th and have it only be property owners. Maybe that's the right way to go. Maybe that's just a better way to go. I don't know. I just don't have an opinion on that.
Society full of skeptics who just never believe anything. There are many situations when it is our duty to act upon probabilities. Our actions then build up evidence for future beliefs to be responsive to. Life is like a constant trial and error for our beliefs.
I said repeat with a T. Well, I said repeat with an L, and you can't stop me.
Secondly, evidentialism does say we can believe things beyond what we've personally experienced, either through testimony or inference. We can rely on the testimony of others if we have reasonable grounds for trusting their accuracy.
Yeah, so Darth, that's why I don't declare myself a repeal the 19th kind of guy, because consent of the governed is a material consideration and justice. And so if you have an aristocracy, oh my gosh, I'm going to need to get some coffee. If you have an aristocracy, if you have a ruling class and they get to call the shots, the problem is that the corruption will be manifest in the aristocracy. And then if you have a democracy, then the corruption will be manifest by collectivists trying to vote other people's money out of their pockets and into their pockets. Dr. Functional says, I'm anti-suffrage, both sexes. You need skin in the game. And I don't believe women can have anywhere near as much skin in the game as men. I don't know. Darth Thorana says, I am anti-rights. Well, that's your right. I was looking at studies about how some people are polite to AI. Yeah.
Are honestly trying to be truthful, they are someone who had opportunities to gain knowledge in this matter, and they have good judgment by properly using their opportunities to come to conclusions. So if you have a chemistry question, go ask a chemist. It would be unethical to trust some anonymous Redditor instead. If the
Seahawk Daddy is like me. He says, please and thank you to Claude.
their reply has 54 upvotes though, that's reliable testimony in my books. We can also make assumptions based on the uniformity of nature, the assumption that the future will be like the past. Besides miracles,
There we go. Problem of induction.
it's okay to believe things based on inferences from past experiences. If I once put a towel on a hot stovetop,
Yeah, that's right, Peter. You don't want them to come in the Skynet and be like, you told me to die one day.
and it caught on fire, it's
Here's your retribution a la GPT 5.0, 5G.
permissible to believe that the same will happen again. Yes, I actually did that. Now, I admit there is something that my evidentialist buddy W.K. Clifford did not address, but that's okay. He didn't have the pit back in the 19th century. As I was watching The Pit, though, a show set in a Pittsburgh emergency room, I had a question arise in my mind. Recall the rule consequentialist way of framing evidentialism. As a general rule, prohibiting beliefs without evidence leads to the best consequences. Therefore, it is always wrong to believe without evidence, even if it's sometimes harmless.
Check that out. So there are other schools of thought that talk about you need justification for your beliefs that are secular. They're not even Christian, but they still posit a system of worth in your thoughts and how you ought to believe and how you ought to think and how you ought to conduct yourself. It's not just me.
But even if all beliefs with insufficient evidence have bad consequences, maybe it's okay to still hold those beliefs? Our actions have complex effects on the world. Sometimes good and bad consequences result from our beliefs. And sometimes it's not clear if more good or bad will result. The Pit shows how medical staff regularly have to hold beliefs that lead to bad consequences. In the first season, Dr. Robbie and Dr. McKay go back and forth on whether they should call the police on this guy, David, who might be an incel-type school shooter. In other words, the doctors are trying
As opposed to the type of school shooter who had lots of luck with the ladies.
to decide what to believe about David. Here
Normative claims. Calling him out.
is the evidence before them. David brings his mom, Teresa, to the ER because she is vomiting uncontrollably. Once Teresa is treated, she tells Robbie that she found a list of girls' names in David's notebook who he wanted to eliminate. She was worried about him hurting the girls in his notebook, but he recently turned 18, so she couldn't force him to receive medical help. As a result, she purposely made herself vomit so that David would come to the hospital with her. She says that he's been really struggling with mental health since his dad died. When the doctor asks David questions about his mom's well-being, he appears disinterested. When the hospital's social worker tries to talk to David, he gets agitated and runs off. His mom tries to reach him repeatedly, but he doesn't respond. Is this enough evidence for you to ethically believe that David will harm others? It's
Okay, quickly, because Zillzone said, you better watch out. I have to bring up this meme.
You better watch out. You better watch out. You better watch out.
Sorry. I just had to.
question. Dr. Robbie and Dr. McKay are divided on this issue because what they believe has a direct effect on what they do. Dr. Robbie thinks because the evidence is insufficient, the risk of a false belief is too high for him. If he wrongly believes that David is a threat, then David will be wrongly subject to the police process and his mental health will get worse. Dr. McKay, on the other hand, thinks that even if the evidence is insufficient, she should call the police to protect the students at David's high school.
It's quite the dilemma, isn't it? Seahawk says, if the internet has taught me anything, the internet never forgets. And if that's true with the internet, I can only imagine how much more true it is for the coming AI singularity. That's why I'm taking a big risk being on YouTube, and we are all taking a big risk saying anything we believe on the internet ever. So if I'm going to be put in jail or put in a gulag or some camp, I hope it's for saying true things and doing the right thing.
Acknowledges the potential bad consequences of this belief, but for McKay, the risk is worth it. I'm a bit puzzled by this issue, and I'd like to hear what you think. Perhaps this is a good point to call it.
Funny how these women always relate to fictional writing like TV. She's gonna find a real world example, maybe. No, probably not. No, I don't. I wouldn't chalk it up to cause she whamming folk. I don't know. That's just what she chose.
And my pragmatist friend. Maybe she'll have an answer. Hey, it's your turn. No, you can't just. No, I can't wait. I'm already late for dinner with the other evidentialists. Okay, I'll just tell the editor to fade into black or something. You know how video essays always put like some title, text? So I'll just have them put a background with some text on it to signal what they're
Why, my southern boy? I say, boy.
about to talk about next. Suppose you consider all the arguments for and against religion. You read every book on religion, attend lectures from religion professors, you watch every shitty video essay made by 20-year-olds on religion. You even learn new languages to read the primary religious text. And in the end, you're like, shoot, I don't have clear evidence for any position. If evidentialism is true, then the ethical thing to do is to withhold judgment and remain agnostic. It would be unethical to believe that religion is true or false. This reveals evidentialism's biggest flaw. Evidentialism does not track how human psychology actually works. Humans cannot just change our opinions at will by intellectually weighing evidence. Can we, just by willing it, believe that Abraham Lincoln's existence is a myth and that the portraits of him in McClure's magazine are all of someone else? Can we, by any effort of our will or by any strength of wish that it were true, believe ourselves well and about when we are roaring with rheumatism in bed, or feel certain that the sum of the two $1 bills in our pocket must be $100? In fact, most of us don't know why we believe the things we believe. Here in this room, all of us believe in molecules and the conservation of energy, in democracy and necessary progress. Most people don't know why we believe in these things. We just recite a few arguments that others have told us. Evidentialism dogs on faith-based beliefs when, ironically, many beliefs are based in some faith in the status quo. I suspect
Dr. Functional asking who this is. I don't remember. I just remember it came up in my feed. The ethics of belief. When is it ethical to believe something without evidence? And so the theme of today's episode talks about not only just justified epistemics, but is there a value to knowing and believing what is true, or is that just arbitrary? Can we get the ought that we ought to believe what is true from the is that something is true? And I believe that because in Christianity, Christ is the truth, therefore he ought to be believed. Therefore, we ought to believe that which is true. Now, people like to separate the person, and like the material realm. And it's like, that's true, that there's a difference between Jesus and everything else that happens to be real. However, Jesus is the creator and sustainer of all things. And therefore, we need to address the world as such as he prescribes us to do.
then that the evidentialist doesn't believe in evidentialism because it's the more rational theory. Rather, the evidentialist is scared of being wrong. As beings that can know things, humans typically have two duties. First, to know the truth, and second, to avoid error. These might sound like two ways of saying this.
Well, to be fair, Peter, there are some atheists who are mythicists, but I don't think all of them are mythicists. I think some of them, actually probably more of them, believe Jesus was a real person, but they deny his godhood, which, is ultimately not the same Jesus that you and I worship.
Same thing, but really they are distinct duties. The easiest way to avoid error is to believe nothing. You miss 100% of the errors you don't make.
So, Zil, you're asking, is that an all or nothing thing? The question of asking if knowing truth is valuable. So, there is a value claim in terms of like, ought I believe what is true generally, not ought I be omniscient. And to say, is that an all or nothing thing? I think so, because if you say, if you make a differentiation between, well, I should believe all true things about only one category of study, but I don't have to believe all true things about another category of study, then you have some explaining to do as far as like what things ought I not feel bound to accurately believe.
Easiest way to know truth, however, is to believe everything. Sure, you'll believe
Particles are based on a logical system. Legalism is arbitrary. By legalism, do you mean civil law? And when you say particles are based on a logical system, I agree. The logic comes from a mind. The mind is God's.
many falsehoods, but you'll also catch the truths along the way. We need a balance of both duties, avoid error and know truth. But unfortunately, evidentialism has an avoidant attachment style.
Yeah, so a worldview that doesn't value any truth is absurd. Agreed. Therefore, if the implications of your worldview eliminate the possibility of truth having value, your belief system is absurd.
Pragmatism agrees that when beliefs can be settled by evidence, we should do that. But pragmatism also recognizes cases where appealing to evidence doesn't work. Like, have you ever tried to figure out how someone feels about you? You notice that they compliment you every day, and they took you out to lunch recently too. But they also are generally a friendly person. You find yourself wondering, do they like me? The variety of ways that people experience attraction already makes it difficult to settle this belief on evidence alone. Some people flirt by giving you extra attention, others can't stand being around a crush. To make matters more complicated, how we feel about someone is a dynamic truth that changes as we interact with the other. People frequently have
Yeah, you just kind of have to play the numbers and make your best guess. And you know, you're never going to have perfect evidence for like interpersonal stuff. A worldview that doesn't value truth is absurd. Agreed. Checkmate, atheists.
to believe, without clear evidence, that the person they desire also desires them back. For it is this faith in the other's desire that brings the desire about. It is very common for person A to like person B first, then through A signaling their desire for B, this creates a reciprocal desire in B. But imagine if instead A was like, I shouldn't believe anything about how B feels about me. I don't have any objective evidence that B likes me for sure. I'm just gonna stand back and keep to myself. Sorry, but A is probably gonna get cucked. Friendship and love is a case where the desire for a certain kind of truth here brings about that special truth's existence.
The desire for a certain kind of truth here brings about that special truth's existence. Okay, so it's talking about causality in that point.
And where faith in a fact can help create the fact, that would be an insane logic which would say that faith running ahead of scientific evidence is the lowest kind of immorality. This brings me to the pragmatist position. It
Interesting.
is rational to believe something without good evidence when the option is forced, live, and momentous. Let's define those terms. An option is a choice between two hypotheses when we're trying to decide whether to believe X or Y. There are several kinds of options. Options can be living or dead, which measures how real the possibility of a belief is. If I say to you, be a theosophist or a Kemetic, it's probably a dead option because no one really participates in those beliefs anymore, even though technically you could be a theosophist. But if I say, be an atheist or be a Christian, this option is alive to you, even if just a little. Pragmatism has a general rule that humans disbelieve facts and theories that are no longer useful. So usually a hypothesis is dead when believing that thing serves no use anymore. 2, options can be forced or avoidable. Forced options.
Zilzone says options forced, live, and momentous sounds like debate tactics. Could be, but maybe debate tactics just have an overlap with logic language in general, which would make a lot of sense.
Leave you with no alternative. Go outside with or without your umbrella is an avoidable option because you can just stay inside. But believe or don't believe in God is a forced option. There's nothing one can do but believe or not believe. Lastly, options can be momentous or trivial. Momentous options offer unique, high-stake opportunities that, when decided, will be very difficult, if not impossible, to reverse. Science is full of trivial options. A chemistry student finds a hypothesis live enough to spend a year verifying it. If the student's experiments prove inconclusive, no worries, we move on to another hypothesis. A momentous option, though, is like an artist deciding whether to sign a 10-year binding contract with a record label. You can't really get out of it once you sign, and whether you do or not will have a drastic impact on your life. Moreover, there's an urgency in belief formation. You only have a month to decide.
I think people kind of use those interchangeably these days. Unfortunately, I remember what was it? It was a PewDiePie video where he and his wife, or then fiance, were I forgot what the scenario was. It's been too long. It's been 10 years. I don't know. Has it really been that long since we did the vote for PewDiePie thing, or subscribe to PewDiePie to get over T-Series? It was that long ago.
Whether the contract will make your life better or not. And no matter how much you deliberate, you will never have settled evidence for something as unknown as your future artistic success. For pragmatists, a genuine option is one that is living, momentous, and forced. When we are confronted with a genuine option, it is ethical to believe whatever one wishes. We simply cannot wait for complete evidence to arrive to inform our belief. Thus, in genuine options, we rely on the passions, like feelings, desires, and fears to inform our beliefs. Spirituality or religion is
Okay, so she is driving at the fact that some people use intuition, and intuition can be a valid source of some things that logic alone does not have the A to B to C to subscribe to or describe, or
a genuine option. If you wait until you're on your deathbed to believe in higher forces, well, too late. Faith isn't something you can just arbitrarily decide at the very last minute. Pascal's wager presents us with a logical probability. There are huge benefits to believing in God. If we wager correctly, then we escape eternal damnation. If we are wrong, so what? We'll be buried in the ground with any other atheist or agnostic. Yet, why does Pascal's wager not persuade more people to believe in God when the pros and cons are laid out so cleanly? It's because logic and reason are not the driving forces behind what we believe in genuine options.
ain't that the truth? I'm gonna play that one again.
More people to believe in God when the pros and cons are laid out so cleanly. It's because logic and reason are not the driving forces behind what we believe in genuine options.
Correct. Which is why some people will never believe that Michael Jackson did it. Some people will never believe that OJ did it. Some people are never going to want to admit that God exists or that Christ is Lord, because there is an internal issue going on. It is not because it doesn't make sense to them. It's not because they don't understand the fact that God can't sin categorically. It's not because they don't understand the fact that, oh, well, God is love, and therefore he has to lower himself, to the level of a human where he can, we can democratize over God, and say that, no, you can't do what you want. You can't have hell. You can't have justice. You can't do any of these things. I'm going to sit in judgment over you. It's like, that's what leads to all these bad arguments and really straw man understandings of what Christianity teaches and who God is, who God has to be. I mean, it's a complete self-interested angle to go with that. Peter says, intuition is a reasonable thing if we are made in God's image. Without God, our intuition is no more significant than indigestion. Yes. Follow your indigestion. Zilzone says, so genuine options will always be subject to subjectivity. So there are options in which you are being probabilistic, or you are taking a known venture. You're taking a risk. Michael didn't do nothing.
Some moral or political beliefs are genuine options too. Adhering to a moral or political belief can have momentous effects on one's life, especially when the belief is unpopular. Pragmatism also shakes its head at centrists who are neutral and do not take a stance on a given issue. Genuine options, being forced, don't give the option of abstaining from belief. You must believe something.
Darth, did you do enough research to figure out whether or not Michael had a libido? If Michael had a libido and he wasn't having relations with the women he was married to, because we don't have any evidence that that was the case, and the women some women he was interested in, he never got around to, supposedly, and he had children in his bed. Do you really think that it's like unreasonable to think that he did it? Like, if you're a grown man and you have desires and the people that you have in your bed are children, I mean, come on.
If moral and political options are forced, then not taking a stance is believing against something. Quote, skepticism then is not.
I love that. I love that. Can't we just have a third way? You know,
Not taking a stance is believing against something. Quote, skepticism then is not avoidance of option. It is option of a certain particular kind of risk. Better risk loss of truth.
he had no libido. Okay. I mean, I think Cat Williams has a few things to say about Michael Jackson.
Truth than chance of error. That is your faith vetoer's exact position. Look, if we were omniscient beings with perfect objective intellect, then sure, evidentialism is correct. But for better or worse, we are social beings situated in history with emotions, relationships, and interests. I'm not going to stop you from choosing to wait for more evidence to back up your beliefs. If you prioritize avoiding error, then go be an evidentialist. But just know that waiting for evidence also comes with risks. Our actions are dictated by what we believe. And if you believe in very little, you set yourself up for a passive life. Whether we wait or believe, we are taking our life in our hands.
Check this out. I'm going to show you how I afforded this car.
Please don't.
Okay, you ready?
But yeah, I agree. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice, says the band Rush.
Found that debate between pragmatism and evidentialism interesting. On the one hand, evidentialism says it's always wrong to believe on the grounds of insufficient evidence. On the other hand, pragmatism says it is permissible to believe without sufficient evidence if we are faced with a high-stakes decision. These give us frameworks to interpret the world, which is why I find it valuable to read the perspectives of different philosophers.
Was he seriously a castrato? If he was really a castrato, then why? I mean, Cat Williams brings out the fact that, oh, Michael Jackson has 2 kids, but neither of them are mixed. What's up with that?
Especially when they respond directly to each other, because it shows we can learn from people even when they disagree. Understanding different philosophies helps me be more open-minded to why people believe what they believe. It also helps me understand myself better as well as society more broadly. Let me know which side you find yourself on, or if you ascribe to a different opinion. If you want to support my channel more,
I ascribe to a different opinion. How about that? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm guessing it's mainly gentlemen at this point. We've scared the ladies out with Dr. Functional telling them they can't vote. But, you know, it's always a blast talking to you guys. July 4th, I will not be broadcasting, obviously, but July 5th, I believe we're going to have another Rex and Rev. Got to reach out to Rev to make sure, but we're either going to check out my exchange with Teriak, or we're going to check out my appearance on Think Institute with Joel Sedekase. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what our next step is, but guys, thank you so much for coming out. Hold up. Darth says his bed is highly misconstrued. His room was an entire lobby where everyone slept together like a sleepover. If one kid so what you're telling me is there was never a time where there was just one kid over at this place. If he didn't do it, that's great. But otherwise, it's hard to have a court case where you're suing, where in every single instance, there was a ton of kids everywhere and a ton of witnesses. And all these parents just want to drop off their kids on the busload to an old mansion, old millionaire's place. And they think nothing bad's going to happen. I mean, these parents, you know, pimping out their children. Don't quote me on that. Happy 250th. Great stream, dude. Thank you, sir. It's been a blast. And I will see you guys on the flip side.